Chapter 3031. Confrontation. The entire place was silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Moses, who was lying in a pool of blood. It was as if they had all become mutes. None of them spoke a word. In the air, one could even hear the slightly uneasy breathing of the crowd. Compared to the humans, the foreign races were even more silent. Their gazes were fixed on the dead Moses for a long time before finally shifting to Juoan. The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix people's saintess fell on Juoan. The shock in her eyes had been replaced by anger and killing intent. Faced with the gazes of the foreign races, Juoan was calm and composed. He slowly stood up and looked at the Phoenix people's saintess fearlessly. Juoan took out the jade bottle again and shook it in front of the Phoenix people's saintess. He said calmly, "Saintess, I have a few questions for you. If you answer me truthfully, the ancestral witch's blood essence in this jade bottle is yours. Also, I won't attack the foreign races anymore." "Oh, you intend to implicate us in the grudge between you and Moses? You want to deal with us?" The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix people's saintess slowly narrowed. Illusory flames appeared all over her body. The strange thing was that although these flames were illusory, they had the burning pain of real flames. Waves of heat swept out one after another, causing the surrounding temperature to rise rapidly. The surrounding people also felt the sudden rise in temperature. Their expressions changed slightly as they looked at the Phoenix people's saintess with fear. Just the burning aura that erupted was already so powerful. They had no doubt that if the Phoenix people's saintess were to attack with all her might, there were probably not many people here who could stop her. The dozen foreign races following behind the saintess did not look away. They roared and released a powerful aura as they stared coldly at Juoan. "Saintess, have you forgotten about us?" Suddenly, a clear voice rang out. Zhongli Haoyang took a step forward and came to Zhuowan's side. A powerful aura that was not weaker than that of the Phoenix people's saintess burst out from Zhongli Haoyang's body. It was like the endless waves of the ocean, surging up wave after wave, blocking the scorching aura released by the Phoenix people's saintess. Yaro Xiangjuan and Jiang Qisheng stood on Zhuowan's side without hesitation. On the other hand, the eyes of Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji, and the others flickered. They hesitated for a moment before walking up. However, from their expressions, it could be seen that they weren't particularly willing to stand up for Juoan. Perhaps it was also because of Hao Yang's face. Although the strength Juoan had just displayed was terrifying, and he had even given each of them a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence, it was still not enough. After all, Juoan was just a loose cultivator without any background. Although they had received the favor of this loose cultivator, it was impossible for them to break off their relationship with a noble existence like the Phoenix people's saintess for a mere loose cultivator. The saintess of the Phoenix people's pretty face changed slightly. She coldly looked at Zhongli Haoyang and said, "Zhongli Haoyang, are you really going to stand up for this loose cultivator? You should know that if you stand up now, you will offend the Mer people and Phoenix people, two of the top 10 races of the primitive heaven domain. Even if you don't think for yourself, I think you should think for the heavenly temple behind you. I think your heavenly temple will definitely not offend both the Phoenix people and the Mer people for a loose cultivator." Zhongli Haoyang's beautiful eyes darkened. She coldly said, "If I act now, I represent myself, Zhongli Haoyang, and not the heavenly temple behind me. Brother Long Wen has helped me, so I have to repay him. This is a matter of heaven and earth. Saintess, you don't need to use the matter between forces to pressure me." The Phoenix people's saintess did not get angry. Her beautiful eyes moved and fell on Yi Qidong, Sichu Liangji, and the others. She said, "Do you have the same thoughts as Zhongli Haoyang?" Yi Qidong and Sichu Liangji immediately showed hesitation. Their eyes flashed, and then they took a few steps back. They cupped their hands at Zhongli Haoyang from afar, intending to stand by and watch. Yaro Xiangjuan saw that Yi Qidong and Sichu Liangji did not intend to participate and could not help but become anxious. Juoan waved his hand and stopped Yaro Xiangjuan. He had not given out the ancestral witch's blood essence to win over Yi Qidong and Sichu Liangji, but he did not want to have a conflict with the human race in front of this alien race. Taking out a bottle of ancestral witch's blood essence was clearly the best way. Anyway, He had a lot of ancestral witches' blood essence. This was just a drop in the ocean for him. Moreover, he did not intend to ask for help from others when he faced the Phoenix People's Saintess. Of course, Zhongli Haoyang stood up for him, which made him look at her in a new light. Dealing with some cats and dogs, I don't need too much help. Zhuowen shook his head at Yarou Shangjuan. Although Yarou Shangjuan was still angry, since the person involved, Zhuowen, had said so, she could only let it go. Cats and dogs? Long Wen, aren't you a little too arrogant? You defeated Moses by luck, and you don't put us alien races in your eyes. The Phoenix People's Saintess was so angry that she laughed, but her beautiful eyes were even colder. Saintess, why are you talking nonsense with this guy who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth? Let's attack together and take down this human. When the time comes, we will deprive him of his 5 senses and let him fall into the Avachi hell and suffer for eternity. A member of the alien race with a human face and a tiger body strode forward. He held a bronze halberd in his hand and looked coldly at Zhuowen as he spoke hatefully. Zhuowen shook his head and looked at the Phoenix People's Saintess indifferently. He sneered and said, I'm not so petty as to deal with you alien races because of Moses. It's because you alien races have gone too far. At this point, Zhuowen's eyes were very cold. That coldness penetrated deep into one's heart. I remember that you said that you were in an alliance with us humans, so you should work together and help each other. But why do I see that you alien races have joined forces and are constantly hunting down us humans? Because of this, most of us humans have died at the hands of you alien races. Zhuowen looked coldly at the Phoenix People's Saintess in front of him. His voice was very low and cold. What? You alien races have joined forces to kill us humans in the Door of Darkness. Zhongli Haoyang's pretty face changed slightly. Her beautiful eyes stared fixedly at the Phoenix People's Saintess, and her voice was as cold as ice as she questioned. Miss Zhongli, you don't know? Someone should have informed you of this through a communication jade talisman, right? Zhuowen frowned. He looked at Zhongli Haoyang, who seemed to be completely unaware of this, and felt very confused. In his opinion, Zhongli Haoyang and the others should have known that the alien races had joined forces to kill the humans in the Door of Darkness. Of course, Zhongli Haoyang and the others knew about this, but they didn't come back to lead the humans against the alien races. This actually made Zhuowen a little unhappy. Chapter 30-32. Zhongli Haoyang takes action. Zhongli Haoyang smiled bitterly. Brother Long, you don't know, but I'm the only disciple of Heavenly Temple who entered the Door of Darkness. Here, apart from Brother Yi and a few others, I'm not familiar with anyone else. Hearing this, Zhuowen suddenly realized that Zhongli Haoyang didn't seem to be lying, and during this period of contact, he found that Zhongli Haoyang's character was quite good. She shouldn't leave the human race in the lurch. Zhuowen glanced sideways at Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji, and the others who were watching from the sidelines, and his eyes revealed a meaningful look. Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji, and the others naturally noticed Zhuowen's gaze. Their eyes flickered, and they avoided looking at him. Zhuowen withdrew his gaze, no longer paying attention to Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji. He already had a conclusion in his heart. Obviously, it was pardonable that Zhongli Haoyang didn't know about this, but Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji definitely knew. However, the two of them clearly prioritized finding ancestral shaman Gonggong's corpse, and they didn't even tell Zhongli Haoyang about this. They understood Zhongli Haoyang's character. After learning this news, she would definitely give up on finding ancestral shaman Gonggong's corpse and go to deal with the human race's predicament first. The two of them wanted to find ancestral shaman's corpse as soon as possible, so they naturally didn't want to waste time because of this matter, so they kept it a secret and didn't let Zhongli Haoyang know. Zhongli Haoyang also seemed to realize something. She glanced at Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji with a trace of anger in her beautiful eyes. Brother Long, what happened to the other humans in the Door of Darkness? Zhongli Haoyang asked with some shame. She was really ashamed. After all, she was the first on the Starry Sky contribution list, the #1 prodigy of the human race. She had a very high prestige among the young talents of the human race. Now, many of her fellow humans were in trouble, but she actually didn't know about it and even came here to find ancestral shaman Gonggong's corpse. She felt very guilty. Senior Sister Zhongli, don't worry, the Foreign Race Alliance was basically wiped out by Brother Long. The leaders of 3 teams, Hu Ben, Shou Yu, and Leng Bai all died at Brother Long's hands. Yaro Xiangjuan said with a smile. You took care of the Foreign Race Alliance. Zhongli Haoyang was slightly startled, then she bowed to Zhuowen and said gratefully, Brother Long, thank you for your help. On behalf of my fellow humans, I sincerely thank you. As she spoke, Zhongli Haoyang passed the ancestral shaman blood essence in her hand to Zhuowen and said, I'm ashamed to accept this blood essence. Brother Long, take it back and use it yourself. USSTSSSSSTSS, eyes, after all, I how T have snow know that the human race TTTT. You heavenses AAATS. YTS Chidong's SS, and there's their Yin Yu Yeong, and the others. However, Yi Chidong and the others could not say anything. After all, if they were to talk about this matter, they were indeed in the wrong. On the other hand, the expressions of the foreign races changed drastically. The Phoenix people's holy maiden's expression darkened. Whether it was Hu Ben, Shou Yu, or Leng Bai, they were all famous geniuses in the primitive celestial realm. Although they couldn't compare to the Phoenix people's holy maiden and Moses, they were all geniuses with high status in their respective races. Furthermore, the 3 of them were extremely powerful. If they joined forces, even a pinnacle creator would have to face them head-on. However, the 3 of them had all been killed by Long Wen. Not only that, but the 3 powerful foreign race teams led by Hu Ben and the other 2 had also been annihilated. This was too unbelievable. However, when she thought about how Zhuowen had easily killed Moses, the Phoenix people's holy maiden felt that it made sense. The human in front of him was only an eternal overlord, but his strength was so terrifying that it struck fear in his heart. However, the Phoenix people's holy maiden wasn't afraid. Although the human in front of her was very strong, she was very confident in herself. She had the 99 Phoenix body, and her cultivation had reached the half-step creator level. Her innate abilities were also inherited from birth. Her strength was definitely one of the best among the younger generation in the primitive celestial realm. Moses's strength wasn't bad, but compared to the Phoenix people's holy maiden, the difference was too great. If the Phoenix people's holy maiden had fought with her full strength, Moses wouldn't have been able to withstand a single blow. Long Wen, you've got guts. You actually dared to kill Hu Ben, Shou Yu, and Leng Bai. You even destroyed their 3 teams. Do you know that the 3 of them have extraordinary origins? Are they geniuses from the 10 major races of the primitive celestial realm? The Phoenix people's holy maiden slowly stepped forward. An even more terrifying and blazing aura surged from her body. The foreign races closest to her panicked and began to retreat, distancing themselves from her. Zhongli Haoyang's aura was instantly shattered by the Phoenix people's holy maiden's blazing aura. Zhongli Haoyang grunted and couldn't help but retreat a few steps. Her beautiful eyes stared at the Phoenix people's holy maiden in disbelief. I didn't expect you to have been hiding your strength all this time. This is your true strength. Zhongli Haoyang's beautiful eyes darkened. The moment her aura was completely shattered, she knew that she wasn't a match for this prodigy in front of her. Unfortunately, she had always thought that her strength should be about the same as the Phoenix people's holy maiden. Only now did she realize that there was a huge difference between the two of them. Jiang Qixing and Yaro Xiangjuan couldn't help but retreat because they couldn't withstand this terrifying and blazing aura. Their eyes were filled with fear. Yi Qidong and Sichu Liangji, who were standing quite a distance away and watching with folded arms, were in a much better situation. After all, they weren't directly hit by the blazing aura. At the same time, they looked at Zhuowen's back with a trace of mockery and resentment. Just now, Zhuowen had exposed them in front of everyone, causing them to hold a grudge against him. Now, they were hoping that this guy would die in the hands of the Phoenix people's holy maiden. Of course, in their opinion, the best outcome would be for both sides to be seriously injured. However, this idea of both sides being seriously injured was completely extinguished when the Phoenix people's holy maiden went all out. Their eyes were filled with fear. This Phoenix people's holy maiden was too terrifying. Even they didn't have the slightest intention to resist such a terrifying aura. They knew that Long Wen was definitely going to die. There wouldn't be any luck left. Long Wen, run. I'll help you block her for a while. Zhongli Haoyang's beautiful eyes were filled with determination. She already knew that there was a huge gap between her and the Phoenix people's holy maiden. However, she wasn't an ungrateful person. Chapter 3033. Flying Swallow Zhuowen stood there calmly. Although the aura of the saintess of the Phoenix people was terrifying, Zhuowen was not too afraid. Just as Zhuowen was about to unleash his Pangu sacred body, Zhongli Haoyang dashed toward the saintess of the Phoenix people like a light swallow. And the words Zhongli Haoyang said before she left, "I'll help you block for a while," were deeply engraved in Zhuowen's heart. Zhuowen wanted to pull Zhongli Haoyang back, but it was too late. Zhongli Haoyang had already arrived in front of the saintess of the Phoenix people. Zhongli Haoyang was using a blue divine sword. The surface of the divine sword was engraved with dense blood-red patterns, and its aura was very strong. Zhuowen had estimated that the divine sword should be a creation-level divine weapon, and its level was not low. Flying Swallow Slash. Zhongli Haoyang's gaze was like a knife. At that moment, she seemed to have ignored the terrifying aura of the saintess of the Phoenix people. All she could see was the light blue divine sword in her hand. The saintess of the Phoenix people stopped and looked at Zhongli Haoyang, who was staring at her with cold eyes. She smiled contemptuously and said, "Zhongli Haoyang, you are no match for me. Since you want to be a moth to a flame, I will fulfill your wish." After she finished speaking, the Phoenix clan's holy maiden flipped her jade-like palm. Immediately, a dazzling flame erupted from her palm. The flame was scarlet red, and it transformed into a scarlet python. It violently shot out and exploded in front of Zhongli Haoyang. Bang, bang, bang. Zhongli Haoyang's gaze was still calm. She held the divine sword in her right hand and suddenly slashed it out. It was so fast that it seemed to have surpassed the speed of light. The saintess of the Phoenix people's expression changed. Zhuowen's gaze also changed. The saintess of the Phoenix people quickly retreated. The moment she did so, the red python was cut into countless pieces and scattered into countless sparks. The saintess of the Phoenix people landed lightly on the ground. Her beautiful eyes were solemn. Only now did she notice that the front part of her skirt had been completely destroyed. She had no doubt that if her reaction had been a beat slower, her feet would have been crushed. It's actually the Flying Swallow Sword Slash. This is Haoyang's strongest move. It's said that this move has a total of 49 moves, and each move is more terrifying than the last. It's like rolling waves, each wave higher than the last. Once enveloped by the flying swallow sword chop, the enemy will have to bear the brunt of the attack. The moment Yi Qi-dong saw Zhongli Haoyang's shocking sword, he revealed a serious expression. Saintess, the flying swallow sword slash has just begun. I wonder if you can last till the end. Zhongli Haoyang's faint voice sounded, like the echo of an empty valley, constantly reverberating in the surroundings. The Phoenix People's Saintess raised her head and immediately saw Zhongli Haoyang's emotionless eyes. The moment she used the flying swallow sword slash, Zhongli Haoyang's emotions completely disappeared. Her eyes seemed to be completely focused on the divine sword in her hand, unmoved by anything else. Clang, clang, clang. Zhongli Haoyang's body was like a swallow, and she closed in on the Phoenix People's Saintess. Once again, she attacked. The sword light was like water, cleansing the lead, and poured down in mid-air, looking so beautiful and fierce. Zhongli Haoyang, do you really think I can't do anything to you? The Phoenix People's Saintess was furious. She stomped her jade feet, and from the bottom of her feet, circles and circles of flame vortexes suddenly emerged. Boom! The flame vortexes grew bigger and bigger, and finally enveloped the Phoenix People's Saintess. At this moment, the Phoenix People's Saintess was like a proud phoenix, controlling the intense flames and constantly playing with them. Bang, bang, bang. Zhongli Haoyang was like a swallow, rapidly circling around the flame vortexes, and the divine sword in her hand constantly slashed out. Every strike was fatal, and every move was terrifying. Terrifying depressions appeared on the flame vortexes, but they still didn't break. Flying swallow slash, swallow returns to nest. Suddenly, Zhongli Haoyang's faint voice sounded in midair again. Meanwhile, Zhongli Haoyang soared into the sky. When she reached a certain height, she suddenly descended. Her speed exceeded the speed of light, and in the blink of an eye, she arrived in front of the flame vortexes. Boundless sword light appeared in front of Zhongli Haoyang, and it manifested into a singing swallow with its wings spread open, which landed in the flame vortexes. This is the final technique of the flying swallow slash, and also Haoyang's most powerful technique. How terrifying! This kind of battle has already exceeded the scope of what we can interfere in. Yi Qi-dong looked at the scene before him with a hint of admiration and loneliness in his eyes. Bang! The flame vortexes suddenly collapsed, and countless sparks burst forth. Amid the sparks, the Saintess of the Phoenix People's Saintess' shocked eyes and fluttering veil could be seen. The swallow let out a loud cry and fell from the sky, landing on the Saintess of the Phoenix People's Saintess. Boom! The terrifying sound of the explosion was accompanied by an endless wave of air that swept out in all directions. Both the human and outsider forces were forced back again and again by this wave of power. Zhuowen also took a few steps back. His eyes were very serious as he looked at the battlefield covered by countless clouds of dust. He even used his divine sense to investigate. However, he discovered that the battlefield was completely suppressed by the terrifying auras of Zhongli Haoyang and the Saintess of the Phoenix People. Although his divine sense could enter, his perception was greatly weakened, and he couldn't see the specific situation clearly. He only saw a person slowly standing up from the clouds of dust, while another person knelt on one knee on the ground. The person who stood up grabbed the neck of the person kneeling on the ground and threw him out. The person who was thrown out was as helpless as a falling leaf. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He discovered that the person who was thrown out was flying towards him. When the person broke through the clouds of dust and appeared in front of Zhuowen, Zhuowen discovered that it was Zhongli Haoyang. At this moment, Zhongli Haoyang's face was pale and she was constantly coughing up blood. There was a huge bloody hole in her chest, and a divine sword was stuck in that bloody hole. This divine sword was Zhongli Haoyang's sword. Zhuowen suddenly rushed out and caught Zhongli Haoyang in mid-air. Just as he was about to land on the ground, a blazing aura swept out from the clouds of dust and blasted toward his vital points. Zhuowen snorted coldly and suddenly blasted out his right palm. His palm emitted a sparkling light and collided with the blazing aura. That blazing aura was a flaming python, but it was dispersed by Zhuowen's palm. Zhuowen then landed on the ground with Zhongli Haoyang in his arms. Zhongli Haoyang coughed up another mouthful of blood. Only then did she see that the person who saved her was actually Zhuowen. Cough cough. Brother Long, you didn't escape? Zhongli Haoyang said weakly. Zhuowen shook his head and did not answer Zhongli Haoyang's words. Instead, he waved at Yarou Xiangjuan, who was not far away. Yarou Xiangjuan quickly came to Zhuowen's side. Zhuowen handed Zhongli Haoyang to Yarou Xiangjuan and said in a deep voice, "Junior sister Yarou, I'll leave Miss Zhongli in your care for a while." Yarou Xiangjuan quickly nodded. Her beautiful eyes fell on the clouds of dust in front of them. There, a beautiful figure slowly walked out and said worriedly, "Brother Long, the saintess of the Phoenix people is too terrifying. You." Chapter 30-34. An unprecedented battle. At this moment, both the human race and the alien race had retreated far away. They stared at the beautiful figure slowly walking out from the depths of the dust cloud. Everyone's gazes were filled with respect, fear, and unknown emotions. This human is quite gutsy. After seeing the saintess' true strength, not only did he not run away, he even has the courage to accept her challenge. The alien race member with a human face and a tiger body stabbed his bronze halberd into the ground. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and sneered at Zhuowen, who was still standing at his original spot. On the human side, Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji couldn't help but shake their heads. This Long Wen is simply courting death. Can't he see that the Phoenix people's saintess' strength far surpasses all of us here? In everyone's opinion, the Phoenix people's saintess already had the strength to kill an ordinary lord of creation. It was impossible for such a monster to appear in the younger generation of the human race. Only powerful alien races could produce a young genius like the Phoenix people's saintess. Therefore, no one thought that Long Wen would be a match for the Phoenix people's saintess when she unleashed her full strength. Whoosh! The beautiful figure finally walked in, and the dust cloud completely dissipated. Only now did Zhuowen realize that the Phoenix people's saintess' ink-black hair had already turned fiery red. It was like a flame that constantly danced and fluttered in the wind, burning fiercely. The Phoenix people's saintess' fair cheeks were covered in fiery red patterns. These patterns looked like the feathers of some kind of bird. Zhuowen knew that these patterns were in the shape of phoenix feathers. The Phoenix people's saintess glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and revealed a soul-stirring smile. "Long Wen, I didn't think that you would dare to stay and not leave. Could it be that you think you have the strength to fight with me?" Zhuowen shook his head. When the Phoenix people's saintess saw Zhuowen shake his head, the smile on her face became even wider. There was even a hint of mockery in her smile. "Saintess, that's where you're wrong. I should say that you'll definitely lose if you fight me." Zhuowen's next words froze the smile on the Phoenix people's face. "You really have guts. You're about to die, and you still dare to joke with me. Unfortunately, I don't think your joke is very funny." After the Phoenix people's saintess finished speaking, she tapped the ground lightly with her jade-like feet. Like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves, she suddenly swept out and quickly swept towards Zhuowen. Wherever it passed, the air would explode, and there would be loud explosions. It was as if the entire sky was collapsing. After this terrifying explosion, what followed was an extremely terrifying and scorching aura. It was as if his entire body had been thrown into a pill furnace, enduring the unbearable high temperature. It was as if he would be refined into a crystal-clear pill at any time. Zhuowen silently looked at the saintess, who was getting closer and closer. He slowly put his hands together, and a mysterious aura surged out from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen's body began to emit a crystal-clear light. This light became more and more intense and dazzling, like a small sun that was rapidly growing in a short period of time. Zhuowen's aura continued to rise at this moment. A ray of light shot up into the sky from his Tianling acupoint, illuminating the earth. Zhuowen used the Pangu sacred body. Of course, he did not explode the full power of the Pangu sacred body. He only used the power of an early 6-star Pangu sacred body. In his opinion, the power of an early 6-star Pangu sacred body was enough to crush all the young people present. Even the Phoenix people's saintess, who had been hiding her strength, was no exception. Bang! When Zhuowen's aura skyrocketed to the peak, the Phoenix people's saintess had already arrived in front of Zhuowen. She slowly struck out with her white, jade-like hand. This palm seemed slow, but it was just an illusion. In fact, it was extremely fast. It carried with it a scorching aura and a terrifying high temperature. Illusory flames lingered on the surface of her jade-like hand. These flames looked illusory on the surface, but they were actually more terrifying than real flames. Zhuoan also struck out with his fist, and the fist force erupted with white light. Bang, bang, bang. The moment the fists and palms collided, there was a dense crackling sound in the air. It was as if someone had fallen from a tall building and was smashed to pieces. The sound was particularly horrifying. Invisible airwaves spread out in a ring shape. The earth was cracking and the air was tumbling. The surrounding people from both the alien race and the human race were all pushed back by the airwaves, away from the battlefield. What a terrifying impact! Will Long Wen be able to withstand the palm of the Phoenix People's Saintess? Jiang Qisheng hurriedly protected Yarou Shangjuan and the seriously injured Zhongli Haoyang. After retreating to a safe distance, he muttered to himself with a look of horror in his eyes as he faced the terrifying wave of air that swept over. He should be able to. Yarou Shangjuan replied with some hesitation. Then Zhuoan definitely won't be able to survive. Didn't you see how terrifying that palm of the Saintess was? It's probably comparable to the attack that injured Haoyang. Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji, and the others arrived not far from Jiang Qisheng's group. The one who spoke was Yi Chidong. Jiang Qisheng glanced at Yi Chidong with a complicated gaze and didn't answer. Speaking of which, in the human race, Jiang Qisheng had known Yi Chidong for much longer than Zhuoan. The two of them were the 5 great monstrous geniuses of the host territory. The two of them had a good relationship for many years, and Jiang Qisheng admired Yi Chidong greatly. However, Jiang Qisheng was somewhat disappointed in Yi Chidong when he had taken the lead to stand by and watch Zhuoan's matter. Yi Chidong also noticed Jiang Qisheng's abnormality and thought of the reason, so he tactfully didn't continue speaking. Instead, his gaze fell on the battlefield in front of him. Although Yi Chidong felt that Zhuoan wouldn't be able to withstand the palm of the Phoenix People's Saintess, he had a premonition that Long Wen wasn't an ordinary person and wouldn't die just like that. Bang bang bang. In the center of the battlefield, smoke and dust tumbled like the tide in the sea. It was so thick that it was impossible to see the situation in the center of the battlefield. The battlefield, which had been silent for a while, suddenly erupted with the sound of explosions one after another. As for the smoke and dust that permeated the air, it became even more intense due to the huge commotion within the battlefield. The degree of shaking was even greater and more intense than before. As long as one wasn't a fool, they would know that the battle was still ongoing. Brother Long, Jiang Qisheng and Yarou Shangjuan's eyes lit up. They knew that Long Wen wouldn't be killed so easily. The smoke and dust in the battlefield became more and more intense. Clearly, the battle was also becoming more and more intense. Suddenly, a wild gale swept over, sweeping away a large amount of smoke and dust in the battlefield. Chapter 30-35. Arousing the bloodline in this messy battlefield, the two figures were like two peerless gods of war as they constantly clashed. Violent energy overflowed in all directions, and the entire space seemed to be split apart. Boom! A thunder-like loud sound was transmitted from the figures that had once again collided. Immediately, countless energy ripples spread and burst apart. The two figures separated upon contact. Each of them withdrew thousands of steps and stood opposite each other in the distant empty space. At this moment, Zhuoan's body was sparkling and translucent, as if he was made of glass. He looked so perfect and flawless. The Phoenix People's Saintess was wrapped in fiery red energy, and her exposed skin was covered in dense patterns. These patterns were in the shape of phoenix feathers, flickering and emitting an extraordinary aura. This human, where did he come from? How can he fight against the Saintess with the 99 phoenix body and not be at a disadvantage? The foreign race that had retreated to the other side, the one with a human face and a tiger body, trembled as he looked at the sparkling and translucent Zhuoan in disbelief. And for some reason, the aura on Zhuoan's body made him have an impulse to worship him. This impulse was very strange and inexplicable. It wasn't just this foreign race with a human face and a tiger body, The other foreign races around also had this feeling. If it weren't for the fact that they still had some rationality, they might have all knelt on the ground and worshipped Zhuowen. So powerful. Is this Brother Long's greatest strength? Even the Phoenix People's Saintess can't do anything to him. Jiang Qisheng and Yao Xiangjuan were pleasantly surprised. Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji, and the others were all stunned and silent, not saying a word. On the other hand, Zhongli Haoyang sat up with difficulty, her beautiful eyes looking at Zhuowen's figure like a peerless god of war, and said with a bitter smile, "I didn't expect this Long Wen to be so powerful. Before, I said that I would help him block for a while, but it seems that was completely unnecessary. I'm just showing off in front of an expert." "Your body." The Phoenix People's Saintess stared at Zhuowen's translucent body and said in a deep voice, "You don't have a human body at all? Who are you?" "I'm just a body refinement cultivator with no special background. I'm just an ordinary member of the human race. As for you, your 99 Phoenix body is actually so powerful. As expected of the powerful physique that the Phoenix people rarely encounter in 10,000 years. Zhuowen looked at the flames around the Phoenix People's Saint. These flames were very difficult to deal with. They seemed to be able to burn everything. There was nothing that could not be burned. Every time Zhuowen fought with the Holy Maiden, the flames that would suddenly burst out of her body were very difficult to deal with. Hearing Zhuowen's praise, the Saintess of the Phoenix people lifted her chin slightly, revealing a trace of pride. She had always been the prodigy of the Phoenix people and had received countless praises and respect. She was already used to being praised. However, this was the first time she had been praised by someone of the same generation whose strength was not any weaker than hers. Therefore, even though she had always been calm, there were some fluctuations in her emotions, and a complicated feeling was born. "You're not bad either. My 99 Phoenix body is already one of the top physiques in this galaxy. There are only a few people who can compare to my physique. However, you can fight with me with your physical body. Your body is definitely not ordinary. It's not something that can be controlled by humans. What kind of physique do you have?" The Phoenix People's Saintess' beautiful eyes were clear. She stared at Zhuowen quietly, as if she wanted to see through Zhuowen completely. "If you want to know the whereabouts of my physique, you have to tell me your real name first." Zhuowen stared at the Phoenix People's Saintess. If he wanted to find out more about Mu Chunxue from this Saintess, he had to understand her background first. Mu Chunxue definitely had the 99 Phoenix body. However, the Saintess in front of him also had the 99 Phoenix body. This made Zhuowen a little anxious and worried. This was because he could not link this Saintess in front of him to Mu Chunxue. He had already concluded that this woman was not Mu Chunxue at all. However, he still wanted to know who this woman was. Also, where was Mu Chunxue? "I can't tell you that." The Phoenix People's Saintess shook her head and replied coldly. "Then do you know a woman named Mu Chunxue?" Zhuowen asked anxiously. The Phoenix People's Saintess paused for a moment. Her beautiful eyes suddenly narrowed, but she quickly replied calmly, "I don't know her." At this moment, Zhuowen had already caught the change in the Saintess's eyes. He was sure that this Saintess had definitely heard of Mu Chunxue's name. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to have such a subtle change in expression just now. That change in expression was definitely not the change in expression of someone who did not know Mu Chunxue. "It seems that you don't intend to tell me what your physique is. However, it doesn't matter. I will defeat you directly and then capture you alive. When the time comes, I will extract your soul and torture it until you tell me the truth." The Phoenix People's Saintess formed a seal with her right hand and pointed at her glabella. A blazing white flame burst out from her glabella. Immediately, the flame condensed into a phoenix pattern on the surface of her glabella. Whoosh! The moment the phoenix pattern formed, it actually left the glabella of the Phoenix People's Saintess and turned into a huge illusion of a phoenix spreading its wings and soaring high in the sky. A high-pitched phoenix cry resounded between heaven and earth. The illusion of the phoenix soared into the sky. Its huge phoenix eyes swept across heaven and earth with a sense of majesty and pride. Then, the illusion of the phoenix let out another phoenix cry and immediately swooped down. It was not rushing toward Zhuowen, but the Phoenix People's Saintess below. The huge illusion of the phoenix completely fell on the body of the phoenix people's saintess. The surrounding air was swept away by waves of terrifying heat waves. The surrounding temperature rose by several times. The phoenix people's saintess was like a phoenix reborn from the ashes. She slowly walked out of the endless flames. At this moment, the phoenix people's saintess did not change much. The only change was that on her back, a pair of huge phoenix wings that were hundreds of feet wide opened. They were so dazzling, so bright, and so breathtaking. The saintess has completely activated the power of the 99 phoenix body. This time, the saintess is really serious. The alien with a human face and a tiger body had a serious expression. He stared at the phoenix people's saintess with a pair of phoenix wings in the sky. His eyes were filled with reverence and worship. He was not the only one who felt that way. The entire alien race felt the same way. They all knelt on the ground and muttered in their own language. It was as if they were praying, but also as if they were giving their blessings. Oh no, the phoenix people's saintess seems to have completely activated the power of her bloodline. Her strength has increased too much. I'm afraid Brother Long is in danger. Zhongli Hao Yang stared blankly at the phoenix people's saintess with a pair of huge phoenix wings. She looked like a phoenix fairy descending to the world. It could be said that the terrifying aura of the phoenix people's saintess made her feel hopeless. She was really too powerful. She was so powerful that even at her peak, she could not summon up the will to resist. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan were also trembling. The worry in their eyes became more and more intense. Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji, and the others all stepped back. Their eyes were filled with fear. Chapter 3036. Bloodline Boundary. The saintess of the Phoenix clan gently stroked her burning hair. Her fiery red eyes looked at Zhuo Wen. She looked very seriously, as if she wanted to see through the aura of fear on his body. However, what surprised her was that the young man in front of her had no fear on his face. His eyes were as clear as water, and in the depths of those clear eyes, she could see a burning desire to fight. Yes, that's right, it was the desire to fight. Interesting. After I completely released the power of my bloodline and reached the state of transcendence, you can still remain so calm. Not bad. It's a pity that you're going to die soon. You're going to die under my power. The Phoenix people's holy maiden spoke as if she was minding her own business. Her jade-like feet lightly tapped the void. Immediately, the void beneath her feet rippled like water. The holy maiden's movements were very elegant. Like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, her jade-like feet tapped the void. Then, the entire space seemed to freeze. The freezing of space only lasted for a short while. Soon after, the space shattered, and the sound of something shattering could be heard. Behind the shattering sound, waves of flames surged. The surrounding flames were so magnificent, but also so terrifying and bone-piercing. The transparent void in Zhuowen's eyes had turned into an endless sea of flames. He was like a helpless person trapped in the sea of flames. In the endless sea of flames, the holy maiden's jade-like feet slowly stepped out. Her movements were graceful and slow, and the direction she was walking towards was exactly where Zhuowen was. Zhuo Wen only felt that the pressure around him was getting stronger and stronger. It was as if he had dived 10,000 meters into the vast ocean. The terrifying water pressure kept pressing down on his body, wanting to crush every inch of his flesh, blood, and bones. Is this a domain? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He did not struggle, but instead raised his head and looked at the holy maiden who was walking slowly towards him. I admire your calmness, but even so, you're going to die today. This is not a domain, but the boundary of my bloodline. Those who are within the boundary of my bloodline will not have freedom. Everything will be under my control. Long Wen, your fate today is to be burned to death by this sea of flames, alone and helpless within my bloodline boundary. But you can be very proud today, because you're the first human to force me to use my bloodline boundary. Compared to Zhongli and Hao Yang, I think you're the real number one genius of the human race. The holy maiden was still walking. Although the distance between them was very short, she walked very slowly, as if she was deliberately dragging her feet. Before you die, you still have some value. I need to ask you some questions. Where did you hear the name Mu? She said coldly. Where? Zhuo Wen's heart throbbed when he saw the malevolence in the holy maiden's eyes. An unprecedented rage surged in his chest. This holy maiden knew about Mu Chenxue, but this holy maiden had hidden it from him. As for why she hid it, Zhuowen knew that Mu Chenxue's situation was not good. Chen Shui, where is she now? Zhuowen suppressed his anger and looked at the holy maiden's teasing eyes as he asked in a deep voice. You can't even protect yourself, but you're still in the mood to ask about Mu Chenxue. Also, you have to remember the primary and secondary relationship. I'm the one asking you now, not you asking me. Do you understand? The holy maiden finally arrived in front of Zhuowen, her eyes filled with teasing. Can't protect myself? Are you sure? A strange smile suddenly appeared on Zhuowen's face. Soon after, an even more vast and terrifying power began to surge from within his body. Zhuowen's body became even more crystal clear, and his aura became even more vast. Catcher. Zhuowen's aura continued to rise, from the early stage to the mid-stage of 6-star, and finally reached the late stage. That terrifying aura actually suppressed the holy maiden's aura after activating her bloodline. Even the holy maiden's bloodline boundary began to crack under this terrifying aura, shattering into countless pieces. The moment he broke through the bloodline boundary, Zhuowen's right fist pierced through the sky and slammed towards the holy maiden. The Phoenix people's holy maiden clearly did not expect this to happen. She was still in a daze when she realized that Zhuowen's fist was already coming towards her. This fist was too terrifying. Just the fist pressure alone made her feel suffocated. If she was hit by this fist, she would definitely be seriously injured. Fortunately, the holy maiden's reaction was fast enough. The pair of giant phoenix wings on her back quickly closed, blocking in front of her and tightly wrapping her up. It's just the wings of a mixed bird. You dare to act so fierce in front of me? Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy and cold. The fist force completely landed on the wings. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. It actually directly blasted through the wings. The fist with a blazing white light penetrated the wings and finally landed on the chest of the Phoenix people's holy maiden. Countless fire plumes scattered in the sky. The Phoenix people's holy maiden looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her whole body bent backward and fell downwards like a powerless butterfly. The moment the fist hit the Phoenix people's holy maiden, Zhuowen's heart palpitated slightly. He quickly came back to his senses. He bent his right knee and pressed down hard, rapidly falling downwards. Zhuowen naturally would not miss this opportunity to beat a drowning dog while it was down. However, the moment he was about to approach the holy maiden, the veil on her face fluttered in the wind, revealing the peerless appearance under the veil. Her appearance was so exquisite and so familiar. The moment Zhuowen saw her, his mind went blank and he lost all thoughts. At this moment, the holy maiden's beautiful eyes suddenly opened. Her bent wings closed again and separated from her back, turning into a giant wheel of fire. The wheel of fire roared and slammed into the chest of the dazed Zhuowen. Poochie. The wheel of fire was too terrifying. It was the most terrifying attack condensed by the wings of the phoenix. Zhuowen's chest was directly cut open, torn apart, smashed, and finally exploded into a cloud of blood. After the last attack, the Phoenix people's holy maiden's face became even paler and she spat out a mouthful of blood. She grabbed Zhuowen's spirit ring and did not want to stay here any longer. She immediately took out a fiery red escape talisman and crushed it. Her whole body turned into a fiery light and disappeared on the spot. She knew that this Zhuowen was dead for sure. Since she had obtained Zhuowen's spirit ring, there was no need for her to stay here any longer. On top of that, her injuries were far too severe. If she were to stay here any longer, it would be a real headache if the other humans were to launch a sneak attack on her. Chapter 3037. Long Wen's tomb boom. Zhuo Wen's badly damaged body fell from the sky. The sound of his body crashing into the ground was extremely heavy. The saintess of the Phoenix people had left, and the foreign races in the distance did not stay there any longer. Brother Long, Jiang Qixing and Yaro Xiangjuan shouted and immediately came to Zhuowen's side. Looking at Zhuowen's mutilated body, their hearts trembled and their eyes were filled with sadness. They realized that Zhuowen's body was terribly damaged. They also used their divine senses to check Zhuowen's divine soul and found that Zhuowen's divine soul was also fragmented and completely gone. They knew that Zhuowen had completely fallen. Zhongli Haoyang dragged her severely injured body and slowly walked over. Looking at Zhuowen's mutilated body, she could not help but close her beautiful eyes. There was a trace of sadness and confusion on her pretty face. Brother Long, why was he distracted at the last moment? Zhongli Haoyang sighed and voiced the doubts in her heart. The moment Zhuowen unleashed the power of the late-stage 5-star Pangu sacred body, it was as if the whole world had collapsed and the sky had become unreal. Zhongli Haoyang could clearly feel how powerful and terrifying Zhuowen was at that time. She did not know that even the bloodline limit of the Phoenix People's Saintess was crushed by Zhuowen's sudden burst of power. After Zhuowen unleashed such a terrifying power, the Phoenix People's Saintess could not resist at all. Even the defense formed by the Phoenix Wings was broken. There was no doubt that the Phoenix People's Saintess was no match for Zhuowen at that time. If Zhuowen had not been distracted at the last moment, the Phoenix People's Saintess would not have been able to seize the opportunity to launch her strongest attack. Zhuowen would not have been ambushed by the Phoenix People's Saintess and died directly. Zhongli Haoyang's doubts were also the same as Yarou Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing's. They could not figure out why Zhuowen would be distracted at the most critical moment. Haoyang, our purpose in coming to the Door of Darkness was to obtain the ancestral witch's essence blood. Now that we have obtained it, we can leave. Yi Chidong walked forward and said to Zhongli Haoyang. Zhongli Haoyang frowned slightly and looked at Yi Chidong indifferently. She shook her head and said, "You guys go first. I owe Brother Long a favor, so I must take care of his funeral matters before I leave." Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji looked at each other, knowing that Zhongli Haoyang was alienating them. Although they were displeased, there was nothing they could do. They bid farewell to Zhongli, Haoyang, Jiang Qixing, and the others and left. Jiang Qixing looked at Yi Chidong's back as he left, his eyes slightly disappointed. Later, when the Phoenix People's Saintess revealed her true strength, they could not help except for Zhongli Haoyang. However, they were all willing to stand up for Zhuowen and support him. If not for Zhuowen, then for Zhuowen's contribution of saving the human race, they should have made a statement. Unfortunately, Yi Chidong chose to stand by and watch in the end, so Jiang Qixing was quite disappointed in his good friend. "I've only met Brother Long once. You two are Brother Long's friends. What do you plan to do with his corpse? If you know Brother Long's origins, you can take his body back to his hometown and return to his roots." Zhongli Haoyang's beautiful eyes looked at Zhuowen's body, then at Jiang Qixing and Yarou Xiangjuan. "To be honest, although we are Brother Long's friends, we met in the Door of Darkness. I only know that he was a loose cultivator. As for his specific origins, we don't know anything at all." Jiang Qixing said a little awkwardly. "By the way, Ma Yujie is Brother Long's good friend. He knew Brother Long much longer than we did. Maybe he knows something," Yarou Xiangjuan suddenly said. Jiang Qixing's eyes were slightly gloomy as he sighed. "I think Ma Yujie has already slipped away. I don't know where he is now. And I tried to contact him with a communication talisman, but there was no reply. Obviously, that guy deliberately didn't reply to me." When Jiang Qixing said this, there was some hatred in his eyes. Obviously, he was unhappy with Ma Yujie's lack of loyalty. Yarou Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes darkened. Her thoughts were much more meticulous than Jiang Qixing's. In the process of interacting with Ma Yujie and Zhuowen, she noticed that there was always a faint hostility between Zhuowen and Ma Yujie. She knew that Ma Yujie was not necessarily Zhuowen's good friend. It was very likely that they were enemies. It was just that they entered the Door of Darkness with the same goal, so they cooperated to enter it together. Since Ma Yujie had already obtained his goal, it was naturally impossible for him to continue following Zhuowen. It was better to part ways as soon as possible. Zhongli Haoyang looked disappointed. She said, "We don't even know Brother Long's origin. What should we do with his body?" "Cremate it first," Jiang Qixing said. "It seems that's the only way." Zhongli Haoyang nodded. She immediately waved her sleeve and summoned a divine fire that enveloped Zhuowen's body. However, Zhongli Haoyang soon discovered that Zhuowen's body was not damaged at all under the divine fire. It still shone with a sparkling light, but it was much dimmer than before. What a powerful body! My divine fire can't burn Brother Long's body at all, Zhongli Haoyang said in surprise. Jiang Qixing and Yaro Xiangjuan were also shocked, but they quickly recovered. No wonder Brother Long dared to fight the Phoenix People's Saintess who activated the 99 Phoenix body. It turns out that his body is not simple. With the strength of Brother Long's body, I'm afraid many foreign races can't compare to it. Jiang Qixing and Zhongli Haoyang glanced at Yaro Xiangjuan and nodded. They agreed with Yaro Xiangjuan's suggestion. In terms of quietness, this was indeed a good place to be buried. After all, even an ancestor shaman like Gonggong chose this place. It was obvious that the feng shui here was excellent. After the three of them decided, they found a better area around the sorcerer god's altar, dug a hole, and placed Zhuowen's body in it. After the grave was done, the three of them erected a tombstone in front of Zhuowen's grave and wrote the words Tomb of Dragon Rune. Chapter 3038. Deep in thought. Not long after Zhongli Haoyang and the others left, Zhuowen's grave suddenly broke open, and a hand reached out from the grave. Then, a figure slowly crawled out of the grave. Cough, cough. This figure was Zhuowen. Zhuowen coughed a few times, then lay on his back and looked at the empty sky above. At this moment, Zhuowen's body was almost cut in half. The huge wound extended from his right shoulder to the left side of his abdomen, and blood was constantly gushing out from the huge wound. However, Zhuowen's body was constantly emitting a faint green light. Under the cover of this green light, Zhuowen's injury was under control and gradually began to recover, but the recovery was very slow. Damn it, the fire wheel manifested by the phoenix wings is so terrifying. It almost killed me. Zhuowen looked at the slow recovery speed of his body and couldn't help but curse secretly. His Pangu sacred body was integrated with the Gomang parasite, and the latter was a parasite that focused on healing energy. Ordinary injuries could be healed instantly. However, the moment Zhuowen was hit by the fire wheel of the phoenix wings, Zhuowen felt that he had lost control of his body, and his consciousness had completely disappeared in that time and space. However, before his consciousness collapsed, Zhuowen timely put his original body into the great world. It could be said that at that moment, the doppelganger had indeed died, and even the doppelganger's divine soul had been destroyed. However, since his original body was fine, he could naturally use his divine soul to awaken the energy of the Gomang parasite in the doppelganger and begin to heal the doppelganger's damaged body. However, the doppelganger's degree of damage was too serious, and the fire wheel of the phoenix wings was extremely high in energy, so the effect of his recovery was greatly reduced. The doppelganger sat cross-legged not far from the sorcerer god's altar and began to silently heal his injuries. The great world turned into a speck of dust and fell on the doppelganger's shoulder. His original body was in the great world and was lost in thought. Zhuowen remembered the moment when the Phoenix People's Saintess veil fluttered and her face was seen. He was 100% sure that it was Mu Chunshue's face. However, other than her face, her temperament, demeanor, and eyes were completely different from the Mu Chunshue in his impression. The two of them were not the same person. It was at that moment that Zhuowen saw Mu Chunshue's face. That was why Zhuowen's heart palpitated and he was distracted, allowing the Saintess to find a flaw. However, now that Zhuowen thought about it, he was sure that it was not the real Mu Chunshue, and he also paid attention to some details. Although the Holy Maiden's appearance was very similar to Mu Chunshue's, in retrospect, there were still some differences in some details. After all, if Mu Chunshue really appeared in front of him, even if she was wearing a veil, Zhuowen could easily recognize her. As for this Saintess, even if she took off her veil, she still gave Zhuowen a strange feeling that was hard to describe. That Phoenix People's Saintess is definitely not Chen Shui. Zhuowen came to this conclusion. His eyes were cold, but he knew that the Phoenix People's Saintess definitely knew where Mu Chunshue was. Otherwise, when he mentioned Mu Chunshue before, this Phoenix People's Saintess would not have lost her composure, even asking him why he knew Mu Chunshue's name. Also, after Zhuowen's clone was destroyed, Zhuowen could have used his main body's soul to activate the Gomang Jiu in the clone to restore it. However, Zhuowen did not do this. He waited for Zhongli and Hao Yang to bury the clone's body and leave before he began to restore the clone's body. He only had one goal in doing this, which was to let everyone think that he, Long Wen, had died. Zhuowen was very clear that if he did not die, the news of him obtaining the ancestral witch Gonggong would be spread. Then when he left the door of darkness, he would be faced with an endless pursuit. Now that he, the Long Wen in name, had died in the hands of the Phoenix People's Saintess and his spirit ring had been taken away by the Phoenix People's Saintess, he knew that everyone's eyes would no longer be on a dead person like him, but rather the Phoenix People's Saintess. This was what Zhuowen thought when his clone was killed by the Phoenix People's Saintess sneak attack. I have to return to the outside world first. That Phoenix People's Saintess should soon realize that there is nothing in my spirit ring. I'm afraid she will come back here again. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely serious. He waved his sleeve and swept away all the tombstones erected by Zhongli and Hao Yang beside the sorcerer god's altar. After making sure that there were no other traces left behind, his clone went into the outside world. The outside world turned into an inconspicuous speck of dust and drifted towards the outside world in an orderly manner. Sure enough, not long after Zhuowen left, a fiery red figure returned to the sorcerer god's altar. After the fiery red figure carefully searched the surroundings of the sorcerer god's altar and did not find anything else, she said hatefully, "Long Wen, how dare you set me up? If I see you again, I will never forgive you." This fiery red figure was naturally the Phoenix People's Saintess who had returned. Moreover, this Saintess had brought a group of people with her. Among them, the person with a human face and a tiger's body followed the Saintess closely with a fawning smile on his face. "Saintess, if what you said is right, and there is really nothing in Long Wen's spirit ring, then where would Long Wen place the inheritance of the sorcerer ancestor, Gonggong?" The person with a human face and a tiger's body asked with flickering eyes. The Phoenix People's Saintess coldly glanced at the person with a human face and a tiger's body and said, "Are you saying that you suspect that I am lying? I wouldn't dare. Saintess, you are born with the 99 Phoenix body. You are the #1 genius of the Phoenix people and a world-renowned genius in the primitive heaven realm. Only you, Saintess, are qualified to inherit the inheritance of the sorcerer ancestor, Gonggong. You are the most suitable person to inherit the inheritance. How could I dare to have any objections?" The person with a human face and a tiger's body trembled as he hurriedly bent down and explained with trembling jaws. "It would be fine if I got the inheritance, but I didn't. It was Long Wen who set a trap for me to fall into. You guys continue to search here and see if you can find Long Wen," the Saintess of the Phoenix people said coldly. The person with a human face and a tiger's body and the other people did not dare to disobey the Saintess's order. They hurriedly cupped their hands, nodded and bowed as they agreed. Then, they began to search around the sorcerer god's altar. However, after searching for a while, they all returned in disappointment and shook their heads at the Saintess. Let's go back first. Although Long Wen is dead, and the inheritance is not in his spirit ring, there is only one possibility. This person gave the inheritance to someone else in advance, and it is very likely that it was his friend. The Saintess of the Phoenix people narrowed her eyes as she thought of Yao Shangjuan and Jiang Qisheng. She remembered that these two people seemed to have a good relationship with Zhuowen. If she guessed correctly, then Long Wen must have given the important thing to one of these two people. Chapter 3039. The alien tribes attacked Zhuowen hid in the Great World and did not go far. The Great World had turned into dust and was floating at the edge of the sorcerer god's altar. Zhuowen naturally heard the Phoenix people's Saintess actions and words clearly. Especially when Zhuowen heard that the Phoenix people's Saintess wanted to find Yao Shangjuan and Jiang Qisheng, his gaze became extremely cold. However, Zhuowen did not rush out of the Great World. After all, his injuries had not fully healed and were still recovering. If he rushed out now, the Phoenix people's Saintess and the alien tribe would attack together. Even if Zhuowen had 10 lives, he would not be able to survive. After the Phoenix people's Saintess and the alien tribe left, Zhuowen stayed in the Great World for a full 3 days. After using up almost a fifth of the Great World's resources, he barely recovered from his injuries. Whoosh! In the silent sorcerer god's altar square, a white light flashed from an inconspicuous speck of dust. Then, a figure appeared in the square. Zhuowen kept the Great World. His original body was still in the Great World. He was now in the form of a clone. It's time to go back. But before I go back, I need to change my appearance again, Zhuowen muttered to himself. His face began to distort. Finally, he changed from a youth with a scar to a fair-skinned, pretty boy with rosy lips and white teeth. After changing his appearance, Zhuowen followed his memory and began to leave this place. The moment he entered the Door of Darkness, he had already prepared a map of the route he would take. In other words, most cultivators would draw their own route when they entered such a dangerous place. This was to prevent them from being unable to find their way back. On the way back, Zhuowen naturally encountered some obstructions. However, to the current him, these obstructions were not worth mentioning. After leaving the gear zone, Zhuowen returned to the Great World. Zhuowen was about to follow the route he had recorded and return when the Gonggong Jiyu worm in his body became restless. Zhuowen had no choice but to release the Gonggong Jiyu worm. After fusing with the Gonggong Jiyu worm, Zhuowen's control of the water element had reached an extremely abnormal level. The water element even had a miraculous effect on healing injuries. The Gonggong Jiyu worm and the Gomong Jiyu worm's abilities complemented each other. Now, Zhuowen's self-healing ability was even stronger than before. At this moment, the Gonggong Jiyu worm was constantly screaming in his hand. Its head in a very human-like manner. Zhuowen glanced in that direction. It wasn't the way back, but in another direction. You want me to go in that direction? There's another exit there. Although Zhuowen's Gonggong Jiyu worm, he already knew the Gonggong Jiyu worm. After all, after fusing with the Gonggong Jiyu worm, he could clearly understand the former's consciousness. Thinking that the Gonggong Jiyu worm had been with the Gonggong Jiyu worm for a long time, and this was the tomb that the Gonggong Jiyu worm had prepared for him, Zhuowen naturally chose to believe in the Gonggong Jiyu worm. After deciding on the direction, Zhuowen rushed in that direction. Along the way, Zhuowen basically did not see any other cultivators. He knew that most of the cultivators should know that the Gonggong Gu's inheritance had been taken away. Obviously, they did not want to continue staying here. Even though there might be many good things hidden here, there were also many dangers. Who knew if they would enter some terrifying danger zone in the next moment and then die? Soon, Zhuowen arrived at the end. He found that there was actually a short mountain at the end. This short mountain was very unremarkable. It was bare, without even weeds. Zhuowen circled around the short mountain and stopped at the back of the short mountain. He saw a mottled white formation at the back of the short mountain. This formation looked like it was drawn with chalk. It did not feel real. It's a teleportation formation. This formation was drawn with an ancient method. Zhuowen could only tell that this formation was a teleportation formation. As for the rest, he really could not tell. Zhuowen took out a high-grade Heavenly Path origin crystal and placed it on the formation. Then, he formed a seal with both hands. The formation was activated, and Zhuowen disappeared from the formation. When Zhuowen opened his eyes, what entered his eyes was an unfamiliar scene. He was in a ruin. He was not unfamiliar with this ruin. It was one of the countless ruins in the dark ancient city. The aura here was too familiar to him. Looks like I've left the Door of Darkness. This looks like the periphery of the dark ancient city. Zhuowen looked around. The confusion in his eyes quickly faded. He thought that he would be directly teleported outside the Door of Darkness. Now, it seemed that he was overthinking. Zhuowen was about to leave the ruins and go to the Door of Darkness to take a look when he smelled blood in the corner of the ruins. Then, he saw 5 corpses lying in the southeast corner of the ruins. Among the 5 corpses, 1 belonged to a foreign race, while the other 4 belonged to the human clan. From the wide-open eyes of the 4 corpses, Zhuowen could tell that the 4 humans must have seen something unbelievable before they died. On the other hand, the foreign race corpse's face was full of indifference. Although it had fallen, There was a trace of fanaticism on its face. He knew that this was the last expression the foreign race showed before they died. Strange. The human clan and the foreign race should have formed a temporary alliance in the dark ancient city. Why would they suddenly kill each other? Zhuowen looked at the 5 corpses. He knew that the 4 humans must have died together with the foreign race corpse. Although the foreign race had united to kill the human clan team in the Door of Darkness, it was the foreign race who had betrayed them first. However, outside the Door of Darkness, there were high-level experts of both the human clan and the foreign race stationed there. If a battle broke out, it would not just disappear. It would probably cause a huge uproar. The battle would definitely be terrifying. Before obtaining the ancestral witch's blood essence, how could the human clan and the foreign race easily start a war? Unless the human clan knew that the ancestral witch Gonggong's inheritance had been obtained by the Phoenix people's Saintess, and the human clan had obtained several bottles of ancestral witch's blood essence. This made the 2 sides feel unbalanced, so they started a war without regard for anything else. Hey! This person's communication jade talisman is ringing. Let's see what it is. Zhuowen realized that things might not have happened as he had imagined. When the communication jade talisman on the waist of one of the human corpses lit up, he immediately took it. Putting down the communication jade talisman, Zhuowen's expression became very serious. He finally knew that the human clan and the foreign race had suddenly started a war in the dark ancient city. In other words, the war between the human clan and the foreign race in the dark ancient city was only the tip of the iceberg. This was because the 10 major races of the foreign race had united again. When the human clan and the foreign race were searching for ancestral witch Gonggong's corpse, they had once again appeared on the Starry Sky battlefield and launched a general attack on the human clan's Starry Sky Tower. Chapter 30-40. Returning to the Door of Darkness, Zhuowen put away the jade talisman with a grave expression. He was a little surprised that the 10 great races of the primitive heavenly realm had joined forces to attack the human race's Starry Sky Tower again. He remembered that the primitive heavenly realm had done this tens of thousands of years ago, but only half of the 10 great races of the primitive heavenly realm had been mobilized. However, he could tell from the message in the jade talisman that the 10 great races of the primitive heavenly realm had all been mobilized. Their military strength was several times that of the war tens of thousands of years ago, and there were even more experts from the primitive heavenly realm who had joined the invasion this time. From the anxious tone of the message in the jade talisman, it could be seen that the situation at the Starry Sky Tower was not good. Zhuowen's gaze was gloomy. He did not expect that so many changes would happen in the outside world not long after he entered the Door of Darkness. It could be described as a complete upheaval. I wonder how Brother Jiang and junior sister Yarrow are doing. Zhuowen frowned slightly as he thought of Jiang Qixing and Yarrow Shangjuan. According to the speed of their return, they should not have completely left the Door of Darkness yet. Although Zhuowen had been delayed for 3 days at the Sorcerer God's altar to heal his injuries, he had taken a shortcut under the guidance of the Gonggong parasite and left the range of the Door of Darkness effortlessly. However, the others were not as lucky as Zhuowen. They had to return the way they came. Although it was not as difficult as when they first entered the Door of Darkness, it would take at least 10 days to half a month to completely return to the Door of Darkness. Only 3 or 4 days had passed. Obviously, Zhongli, Hao Yang, Yi Qidong, and the Saintess of the Phoenix people should still be on their way out of the Door of Darkness. The 10 great races have joined forces to attack the Starry Sky Tower. This is not a small matter. I'm afraid that the human race and the alien race at the Door of Darkness have already started fighting. Zhuowen's gaze was gloomy. He knew that the entrance of the Door of Darkness was no longer a good place. Under normal circumstances, Zhuowen would definitely not return to the Door of Darkness and walk right into the trap. However, Zhuowen was still worried about Jiang Qixing and Yarrow Shangjuan, as well as Zhongli Hao Yang. Although he had only met her once, Zhuowen admired Zhongli Hao Yang's character and moral character. Zhuowen also approved of Zhongli and Hao Yang as friends. Sigh. Sometimes, I really feel like I'm a great saint. He's too loyal. Zhuowen laughed bitterly at himself. He shook his head and headed towards the Door of Darkness in the depths of the ancient city of darkness. He was still worried about Jiang Qixing, Yaro Xiangjuan, and the others, so he decided to go to the Door of Darkness to check on the situation. Right now, the dark ancient city was exceptionally quiet. It was a deathly silence, which was a great contrast to the scene when the human race and the non-human race had come to explore. On the way to the Dark Gate, Zhuowen saw all kinds of ruins along the way, as well as the corpses of humans and aliens scattered on the ruins of the dark ancient city. However, overall, there were more human corpses than alien corpses. From the condition of these corpses, Zhuowen guessed that the sudden war between the human race and the alien race should have happened 4 or 5 days ago. Coincidentally, it happened to be the time when the alien race joined forces to encircle and annihilate the human race inside the Door of Darkness. It seemed that at that time, the alien race outside had already sent an army to invade the human race. The closer he got to the Door of Darkness, the more human and alien corpses he saw. They were not scattered, but floating in batches. Zhuowen was very vigilant. His speed was not fast, but he was unusually cautious. Like a black leopard hunting at night, he tried his best to hide and not let himself be exposed. 10 days later, Zhuowen landed in the ruins closest to the Door of Darkness. He restrained his aura, and his eyes were unprecedentedly dignified. The ruins were almost completely broken, and the damage was very serious. From the huge gullies and ruins, Zhuowen could see that these damages should have been caused recently. He could also feel a biting cold killing intent from these damaged parts. These killing intents should have been left behind by the people who had fought in the past. There were too many corpses in the ruins, almost piled up into a small mountain. He even saw some familiar faces among these corpses. They were all cultivators he had seen in the human and alien race teams at the Door of Darkness. The moment Zhuowen landed in the ruins, he had already used his divine sense to scan the ruins. There were no living people in the ruins, only dead people. He could have continued to move forward and go to the Door of Darkness, but he did not. This was because the moment he arrived near the ruins, he felt a terrifying battle fluctuation. He was sure that the battle fluctuation should have come from the Door of Darkness in front of him. Zhuowen's heart sank. He knew that there was a great battle at the entrance of the Door of Darkness. Without thinking, he knew that it should be a battle between the supreme experts of the human race and the alien race. Although the ruins were the closest to the Door of Darkness, the actual distance was not short. With Zhuowen's speed, it should take about an hour to reach the Door of Darkness from here. However, the battle fluctuation could be transmitted so far away. One could imagine how terrifying the battle near the Door of Darkness was. Soon, he found that not far from the Door of Darkness, there were 2 groups of people fighting to the death. These 2 groups were naturally the human side and the foreign side. With a single glance, Zhuowen could tell that these 2 groups of humans and outsiders were the ones who had entered the Door of Darkness. However, the number of humans and foreign side was much smaller than before he had entered the Door of Darkness. Zhuowen knew that those who were missing had basically all died in battle. On the human side, Senki Yin, Xiong Puyu, and An Shaojin were all present. The 3 of them were early-stage master, leaders of Dao Palace forces, and their strength was unfathomable. In addition, Zhuowen discovered that an ordinary-looking old man erupted with an aura that was not the slightest bit weaker than Senki Yin's group. Clearly, this ordinary-looking old man was also a master of Heaven's Transcendence realm. Chapter 3041. The Great Battle. Zhuowen remembered that when Zhongli Haoyang had first arrived at the Door of Darkness, she had addressed this elder as Elder Zhong. Zhuowen couldn't help but sigh at the Heavenly Temple's foundation. With a single glance, he could tell that Elder Zhong wasn't the temple master of the Heavenly Temple. Instead, he was here to act as Zhongli Haoyang's bodyguard. Since he was also an early-stage transcending heaven master, didn't that mean that the Heavenly Temple had more than one transcending heaven master powerhouse? It seemed that the Heavenly Temple's reputation as the #1 Dao Palace faction in the Xian Mi Sky domain wasn't undeserved. The other Dao Palace factions paled in comparison. At the very least, Zhuowen had seen many Dao Palace factions, and most of them only had one early-stage transcending heaven master powerhouse. Moreover, the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect had never had a transcending heaven master powerhouse before. If Senki Yin hadn't been lucky enough to break through, the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse sect would have been at the bottom of the Dao Palace factions. At this moment, Senki Yin, Xiong Puyu, and An Shaojin had joined forces and were fighting against a figure whose entire body was covered in blazing flames. What surprised Zhuowen was that the 3 early-stage transcending heaven masters, Senki Yin, and Xiong Puyu weren't able to gain the upper hand in a 3-on-1 battle. On the contrary, Senki Yin and the other 2 were at a disadvantage. That burning figure was too terrifying. Every move he made seemed to contain the power to destroy the heavens and earth. Zhuowen naturally saw the true face of that burning figure. It was the second elder of the Phoenix people. Zhuowen's gaze became extremely solemn. This second elder of the Phoenix people was also an early-stage transcending heaven master, but he wasn't far from the mid-stage. Moreover, this old fellow's bloodline was very powerful. The blood of the Phoenix flowed through his veins. Although he couldn't compare to the Phoenix people's holy maiden, he was already a high-level existence among the Phoenix people. Relying on his cultivation realm and bloodline, this second elder's strength far exceeded that of an early-stage transcending heaven master. This was also the final reason why Senki Yin and the other 2 were still at a disadvantage when fighting against the 2 elders. On the other side of the battlefield was the battle between Elder Zhong of the Heavenly Temple and a mermaid. This merman was abnormally tall, much taller than Sauron and Moses. Just his height alone was at least 10 feet. Furthermore, this merman's entire body was covered with ferocious spikes. As these spikes danced, they emitted a chilling light that could shake one's soul. Zhuowen could sense that this merman's aura was far stronger than Da's. He was actually also an early-stage heavenly master expert. Zhuowen noticed Mda not far away. When he looked at the merman, his eyes were filled with respect and fanaticism. He knew that this merman was most likely in existence on the level of the merman race's patriarch. Before entering the Door of Darkness, Zhuowen did not see the mermaid. Clearly, the mermaid had come after they entered the Door of Darkness. On the other side, there were only 2 early-stage heavenly master experts, but they were enough to match the 4 early-stage heavenly master experts of the human race. In addition to the high-level battle between these 2 sides, the human race and the other race were also fighting. Although the human race outnumbered the other race, the human race was being suppressed by the other race. After all, the other race's overall quality was much stronger than that of the human race. In the same realm, the other race could fight 3 people at once. Unless the human race outnumbered the other race by 3 times, the result was destined to be defeated. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He was hesitating whether to make a move at this moment. Speaking of which, his purpose in returning to the Door of Darkness was to take away his 2 good friends, Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan. As for Zhongli Haoyang, she had an early-stage heavenly master expert as her bodyguard, so Zhuowen was not worried about her safety. If he made a move now, he would expose his identity. At that time, it would not be so easy to take away Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan. Just as Zhuowen was hesitating, ripples appeared on the surface of the Door of Darkness, which had been motionless all this time. Immediately, more than a dozen figures appeared from the ripples. Leading them were 2 young men. Zhuowen was not unfamiliar with these 2 young men. They were Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji, who had watched with folded arms at the sorcerer god's altar. Zhuowen did not have a good impression of the 2 of them, but he did not have any bad feelings either. Although the 2 of them had maintained a neutral attitude when Zhuowen had faced the Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people, Zhuowen knew that most people would have made the same choice as Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji. After all, he was not familiar with the 2 of them. He did not have the charisma to take the initiative to make others sacrifice their lives for him. However, Zhongli Haoyang was an exception. Just because he had given her his essence blood, she was willing to sacrifice her life to repay his kindness. This made Zhuowen have a good impression of her. The moment Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji and the others appeared at the entrance of the Door of Darkness, they immediately saw the scene of the battle at the entrance and could not help but be stunned. Yi Chidong, Sichu Liangji, quickly returned to the team and helped the team repel the foreign races, Senki Yin immediately noticed Yi Chidong and the others and hurriedly transmitted his voice to Yi Chidong and Sichu Liangji. The two of them quickly realized that Lian Meng had broken off the relationship between the human race and the foreign races. Now they had to join the battle and repel the foreign races. Otherwise, they would have no way to survive. The cultivators sent into the Door of Darkness were not weak. On the contrary, their strength and talent far surpassed their peers. Therefore, after receiving Senki Yin's transmission, they immediately joined the team of the human race that was still fighting and helped the human race resist the foreign races. The Scarlet Mountain Villa behind Yi Chidong was the #1 Dao Palace faction in the host region. The master of the Scarlet Mountain Villa was also an early-stage sky-reaching master. However, he did not come to the Door of Darkness this time and only sent a creation master to protect Yi Chidong. There were still many people like Yi Chidong on the human race's side. As the leaders of Dao Palace factions, they were usually busy cultivating in seclusion or dealing with other important matters and had very little time to spare. Although the matter of ancestral shaman Gonggong this time was important, it was not to the extent that these Dao Palace bigwigs would go crazy. Therefore, only the 10 Extremities Yin Corpse Sect, Yin and Yang Divine Sect, and Scarlet Heaven Sword Tower had personally come. The rest of the Dao Palace faction leaders had sent other experts to accompany their geniuses. With the addition of Yi Chidong and the others, the human race's decline immediately slowed down a lot. However, the foreign races still had the advantage, but the human race was not suppressed like before. In the spacetime tunnel, Zhuowen silently observed and saw that Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing had not come out. He also did not make any moves. Speaking of which, he had not come to the Door of Darkness to take Jiang Qixing and Yaro Shangjuan away. His main purpose was to confirm whether they could return safely. If he confirmed that they were safe, Zhuowen naturally did not plan to appear. Chapter 3042. Unrelenting after waiting for a while, another ripple appeared from the Door of Darkness, and 3 figures appeared. Zhuowen's eyes lit up when he saw the 3 figures. They were the people he was waiting for, Yaro Shangjuan, Jiang Qixing, and Zhongli Haoyang. Zhongli Haoyang's face was still pale, but her aura was much more stable than before. Her injuries should have improved. After all, Zhongli Haoyang was the strongest prodigy of the Heavenly Sacred Temple. She should have no lack of top-grade divine pills on her. Her injuries had probably healed so quickly because she had consumed a top-grade divine pill. However, Zhongli Haoyang and Yaro Shangjuan didn't look too good, and they were a little anxious. After appearing in the Door of Darkness, they immediately took out their flying divine artifacts and fled. The humans were all pleasantly surprised when they saw Zhongli Haoyang come out. Among them, Elder Zhong, who was engaged in a fierce battle with the merman, finally relaxed his frown. But soon, his expression changed slightly because he noticed the strange expression on Zhongli Haoyang's face. Sure enough, he took out his flying divine artifact and fled the moment he saw Zhongli Haoyang come out. Unfortunately, as soon as the flying divine artifact flew out, a huge flaming hand suddenly shot out from the Door of Darkness. The flaming hand grabbed the tail of Zhongli Haoyang's flying divine artifact in its hand. The flying divine artifact's forward momentum was immediately stopped. Sizzle! Sizzle! The blazing flames on the flaming hand surged, and the scorching heat started to melt Zhongli Haoyang's flying divine artifact. An incredulous look appeared on Zhongli Haoyang's face. Her flying divine tool wasn't of a particularly high grade, but it was still a God of Creation stage flying divine tool. There were many spell formations and restrictions within it, and it had been refined from many precious materials, so it was extraordinarily sturdy. But now, the flying divine artifact couldn't withstand the heat of the flaming hand and started to melt. It was unbelievable. "Do you really think you can escape?" A proud female voice sounded from inside the Door of Darkness. The Door of Darkness rippled violently again, and the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden appeared at the entrance of the Door of Darkness with more than 10 alien races. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden stared coldly at Zhongli Haoyang in the air. She grabbed at the air with her right hand, and the flaming hand started to pull. Crack! The flying divine artifact instantly shattered into countless flaming fragments. Zhongli Haoyang's eyes narrowed. She gritted her teeth and took out a golden talisman. The golden rune engraved on the golden talisman burst out with a blazing golden light. Immediately, it turned into a golden stream of light. It was like a golden river hanging high in the sky. It flowed against the current and blocked the giant flaming hand behind it. Bam 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 bam. I told you that you can't escape. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden wasn't particularly surprised that the flaming hand was blocked. Golden flames started to dance in her beautiful eyes. The flaming hand had changed completely. It had turned from a scarlet red to a golden color. Its power had also skyrocketed in an instant, suppressing the golden river in one fell swoop. The golden river was torn apart, and the flaming hand swept out as if it had teleported. It instantly closed in on Zhongli Haoyang and the others. The flaming hand was too terrifying. If the three of them were to be hit by it, they would be severely injured even if they didn't die. Zhongli Haoyang and the others' expressions changed drastically. They knew that they could only take it head-on. The flaming hand was too fast, and it was too late to dodge. The two of you, run. I'll stop the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden. As long as you return to the human team, the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden won't dare to charge into the human team alone. Zhongli Haoyang pushed Yarou Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing, who were still in shock, toward the human team. She then turned around with a determined look in her beautiful eyes. Hehe, you're courting death. You weren't my match when you weren't injured. Now that you're injured, do you think you'll be my match? You're overestimating yourself. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden sneered coldly. She glanced at the dozen or so aliens behind her. The aliens understood the meaning of the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's gaze. They nodded and rushed out. Their targets were Jiang Qixing and Yarou Shangjuan, who were pushed away by Zhongli Haoyang. Zhongli Haoyang also realized the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's intention. Her expression changed slightly, and she planned to return to block the aliens. Unfortunately, the terrifying golden flaming hand had already arrived in front of her. The temperature was so high that it seemed as if even the space around it would evaporate. Zhongli Haoyang could only face it seriously. Otherwise, she might die at the hands of the flaming hand. Zhongli Haoyang took out several talismans of different colors. They formed several different colored barriers in front of her. They barely blocked the flaming hand. However, looking at Zhongli Haoyang's tottering body, it seemed that she was barely able to block it. She probably wouldn't be able to block it for long. Holy Maiden, your strength isn't as strong as before. Hehe, your injuries are more serious than mine, aren't they? If Brother Long hadn't shown mercy at the last moment, would you still be alive? Zhongli Haoyang mocked. The Phoenix People's Holy Maiden's beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent. She looked coldly at Zhongli Haoyang as if someone had caught her sore spot. She said coldly, "It seems like you're really courting death." As she spoke, the Phoenix People's Holy Maiden formed a seal with her jade-like hands. Suddenly, the flaming hand became even more terrifying. Its flames were ferocious, and the temperature became even more terrifying. To the Holy Maiden, the battle with Long Wen was an unerasable humiliation. Although she was very curious as to why Long Wen was distracted at the last moment, she still trembled with fear when she thought of that battle. That time, she really felt that she was in a life-threatening danger. Zhongli Haoyang immediately felt the pressure. Her pure white forehead was covered with fine sweat. Not far away, Yarou Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing were blocked by more than a dozen foreign races, blocking their way. These foreign races were all very strong. Yarou Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing were instantly at a disadvantage when they worked together. They were tottering as if they would be defeated at any time. Young Miss. Old Zhong, who was originally entangled with the leader of the Merfolk tribe, saw that Zhongli Haoyang was on the verge of collapsing under the giant golden flaming hand. His expression changed slightly as he pushed the leader of the Merfolk tribe back with a palm strike. Then, he rushed towards Zhongli Haoyang in an attempt to rescue her. Hehe, you want to leave? It won't be that easy. Chapter 3043. Explosive enlightenment divine pill. The wind from the fist whistled and arrived in front of Elder Zhong in an instant. Elder Zhong's expression changed slightly. His gaze was gloomy as he struck out with his right palm. It collided violently with the leader of the Merfolk clan. Terrifying ripples spread out, shattering the surrounding space into dust. "Get lost!" Elder Zhong roared angrily. Unfortunately, the merman leader smiled and did not have the slightest intention of leaving. "Old man, if you want me to get lost, then defeat me. You haven't even defeated me, yet you're telling me this. Don't you think it's funny?" The merman leader sneered. Elder Zhong was silent, but the killing intent in his eyes was shocking and even terrifying. "You're the one who forced me to do this." Elder Zhong took out a scarlet divine pill and swallowed it. Immediately, a bloody mist erupted from Elder Zhong's body. Streaks of blood appeared on the surface of Elder Zhong's skin. His aura suddenly became extremely terrifying, many times stronger than before. Elder Zhong's shriveled face was now covered with streaks of blood. He looked very ferocious and terrifying, like a murderous demon that had come out from a pile of corpses. The merman leader's expression changed drastically. He stared at Elder Zhong, who had undergone a tremendous transformation. He could not help but step back and put some distance between himself and Elder Zhong. He looked at the latter in fear. What kind of divine pill did this old man take? His aura is too terrifying. He's almost at the peak of the early stage of Heaven Ascension Master. I'm afraid he's not far from the middle stage of Heaven Ascension Master. The merman leader's expression did not look good. He looked at Elder Zhong with vigilance. He could feel the latter's strong sense of danger. Elder Zhong's sudden burst of terrifying aura immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding humans and foreign races. In particular, Senki Yin, Xiong Puyu, and Xiaojin, and the two elders of the Phoenix people were also attracted by Elder Zhong's battle. This old man took the explosive enlightenment divine pill. What a crazy old man. Senki Yin's eyes flickered. Xiong Puyu and Xiaojin also looked serious. They naturally knew about the explosive enlightenment divine pill. It was a fortune-grade divine pill. Its only use was to stimulate the potential in a cultivator's body, instantly erupting with more power. However, the duration of this burst awakening divine pill was not long, and the side effects were huge. Because after using this explosive awakening elixir, one's cultivation level would drop. Elder Zhong was an early master of Heaven Ascension, but after taking the explosive awakening divine pill, he would gain unprecedented power, but at the same time, his cultivation level would drop from the early master of Heaven Ascension. Die for this old man. Elder Zhong was like an awakened lion. He took a step forward, causing the air to explode and space to distort. He disappeared from where he stood as if he had teleported. When Elder Zhong appeared again, he was already in front of the Merfolk leader. His right hand formed a palm and pressed against the Merfolk leader's chest as if he had teleported. So fast. This was the only thought in the merman leader's mind. He only had time to cross his arms in front of his chest before the palm came crashing down. Catcher. The merman leader's eyes widened. His arms seemed to have been broken by a huge force. His body flew out involuntarily like a falling leaf, lonely and helpless. Whoosh! Before the Merfolk leader could react from his melancholy, Elder Zhong's figure appeared in front of him again. Elder Zhong was expressionless. He lifted his right leg and smashed it down, hitting the Merfolk leader's chest. The Merfolk leader spat out a mouthful of blood and fell from the sky, crashing onto the ground. The entire ground shook. After Elder Zhong did this, he did not care about the Merfolk leader who had been smashed to the ground by him. He took a step forward and rushed toward Zhongli Haoyang. At this moment, the barrier created by Zhongli Haoyang began to crack. It was on the verge of collapsing, as if it would shatter at any moment. Zhongli Haoyang's face was pale, and her delicate body was trembling. She probably could not hold on for much longer. Zhongli Haoyang naturally saw the battle on Elder Zhong's side. When Elder Zhong rushed over, she was pleasantly surprised. "Elder Zhong, help me save my friends first. Come and save me later." Zhongli Haoyang hurriedly pointed at Yaro Xiangjuan and Jiang Qixing as she transmitted her voice to Elder Zhong. Elder Zhong was startled, but he immediately shook his head and rushed toward Zhongli Haoyang. He directly passed by Jiang Qixing and Yaro Shangjuan, who were still struggling and could be taken down by the foreign races at any time. Zhongli Haoyang's beautiful eyes showed a trace of hatred. She hurriedly transmitted her voice again, "Elder Zhong, it's easy for you to save them." Elder Zhong sighed and shook his head. "Miss, it's too late. If I save them, you may die. I will not allow this to happen." Elder Zhong's eyes were clear. He instantly rushed in front of Zhongli Haoyang. With a wave of his sleeve, the terrifying golden flame hand instantly dissipated. The Phoenix People's Saintess groaned. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Her pretty face was slightly pale as she stared at Elder Zhong. "Saintess, die." Elder Zhong stood in front of Zhongli Haoyang and blasted his skinny palm toward the Phoenix People's Saintess. Elder Zhong's palm was too terrifying. It surpassed the strength of an early-stage sky-reaching master. Even if the Phoenix People's Saintess were at her peak, she would not be able to block it. She would probably die on the spot. Not far away, the Phoenix People's second elder naturally saw this scene. He frowned and reminded, "Saintess, retreat." The Phoenix People's Saintess was rather calm. She waved her hand and produced a fiery red escape talisman. Crushing the escape talisman, the Saintess of the Phoenix clan turned into an illusory spark and disappeared from where she was, drifting away. Elder Zhong frowned slightly. His palm had hit nothing. The escape talisman that the Phoenix People's Saintess had produced was very advanced. It turned into an illusory spark, and he could not even catch a trace of its aura. The moment Elder Zhong rescued Zhongli Haoyang and attacked the Phoenix People's Saintess, Jiang Qixing and Yaro Shangjuan, who were surrounded by more than 10 aliens, could not hold on any longer. They both vomited mouthfuls of blood and became extremely weak. "It's over." Looking at the aliens surrounding them and attacking them, Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing's hearts were filled with despair. They knew that they would not be able to escape this time. There was no doubt that they would die. Deep in the spacetime tunnel, Zhuoan saw this scene and sighed softly. He had thought that Elder Zhong would save Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing. Unfortunately, he had thought too much. Zhuoan naturally would not watch Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing die in front of him. He took out the Huyi Divine Bow and a Genesis Divine Arrow and poured a large portion of his energy into it. Chapter 3044. The Merman tribe leader was in a sorry state. Zhuowen left a trace of his divine sense in the divine arrow. Soon after, he loosened his grip on the feather. Whoosh! The sound of the arrow tearing through the air rang out as if an earth-shattering bolt of lightning had descended from the heavens. The sound was very sharp and deafening. The divine arrow was too fast and carried with it a strong killing intent. It shot out of the spacetime tunnel and headed toward the group of foreign races where Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing were. Puff! 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 The divine arrow pierced through 3 foreign races in an instant. The 3 foreign races didn't even make a sound before they exploded into clouds of blood mist. They couldn't be more dead. After killing the 3 foreign races in an instant, the divine arrow seemed to have a mind of its own as it suddenly turned around and shot toward the other foreign races around it. In just a few breaths' time, 9 foreign races had died to the divine arrow. The remaining 4 or 5 foreign races all looked terrified. They no longer cared about Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing and fled in panic. Unfortunately, the divine arrow didn't show any signs of letting them go. It suddenly turned around and pierced through the remaining foreign races' foreheads in an instant. After killing that foreign being, the divine arrow slowly landed beside Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing. The killing intent around it was completely restrained, and it looked like an ordinary divine arrow of the Genesis stage. This scene was naturally seen by everyone present. However, the majority of the people revealed bewildered expressions because they discovered that the divine arrow that was filled with killing intent had come from an unknown place. It was as if it had appeared out of thin air. Yaro Shangjuan and Jiang Qixing were pleasantly surprised. They were all too familiar with the divine arrow and the strong killing intent it carried. Its brother Long, their eyes were filled with surprise. They didn't expect Long Wen to still be alive. Zhongli Haoyang followed beside Elder Zhong. Her beautiful eyes were filled with guilt when she saw that Jiang Qixing and Yaro Xiangjuan were about to die under the foreign race's encirclement. However, when the divine arrow flew through the air, her beautiful eyes revealed a look of joy. However, there was some doubt in her heart. Who exactly was the owner of this divine arrow? Speaking of which, Zhongli Haoyang had only met Zhuowen a few times, and she had only seen Zhuowen fight twice, which was when Zhuowen fought against Moses and the Phoenix People's Saintess. In those two battles, Zhuowen didn't use the Huyi sacred bow or the divine arrow, so Zhongli Haoyang didn't know that the divine arrow that was filled with killing intent was Zhuowen's doing. The Saintess of the Phoenix people, who had already flown into the ranks of the foreign races, had a puzzled look in her eyes. At the same time, she was also a little angry that someone had ruined her plans. Her understanding of Zhuowen was about the same as Zhongli and Haoyang, and it was limited to the battle at the sorcerer god's altar. Similarly, she had never seen the trump card of the Huyi divine bow. Although most of the people were puzzled by the sudden appearance of the divine arrow, there was one person in the ranks of the human race whose eyes were shining with a sinister light. This was an old man who looked to be in his 60s. He was wearing a dark red robe, and although his face was wrinkled, his eyes were bright and full of vigor. He had a majestic aura that was difficult to look at. If Zhuowen saw this old man, he would definitely recognize him. This old man was the great elder of the 10 Ultimate Yin Corps sect, Gao Yanghong. He was a great expert in the 10 Ultimate Yin Corps sect, second only to Senki Yin. The aura of this divine arrow is too similar. Zhuowen must be nearby. Gao Yanghong squinted his eyes and looked around the void. He quickly locked onto a direction. Although he didn't find the exact location of the divine arrow's owner, he had a clear direction. As long as he broke through the void, he would be able to find the exact location of the divine arrow's owner. However, Gao Yanghong was very cautious. He quietly hid in the ranks of the human race and cooperated with them to resist the foreign race. He tried his best not to show any abnormalities in his expression, but his heart was very excited. When Zhuowen had broken into the secret underground chamber of the sect, he had sent Ba Jingwei, Jiyu Hongcai, and Mao Xinhu into the secret underground chamber to kill Zhuowen. Unfortunately, the 3 elders had died in the secret underground chamber. In the end, Zhuowen had shot a terrifying arrow and destroyed the passage to the secret underground chamber. Gao Yanghong had even used all his skills to block that terrifying arrow. The killing intent and aura of this divine arrow that had suddenly appeared from the void was too similar to the arrow that Zhuowen had shot in the secret underground chamber. To be more precise, it was almost exactly the same. Gao Yanghong was very excited. He knew very well that Zhuowen had hidden too many treasures on him. Among them, he knew that the transcending heaven-level divine artifact, the Yama's ghost diagram, had been hidden in the depths of the secret underground chamber by Senki Yin, the sect master of the Yin Corps sect. It had been stolen by Zhuowen. In addition to the Yama's ghost diagram, the terrifying divine arrow that Zhuowen had shot was also a valuable treasure. As long as he could catch Zhuowen, Gao Yanghong knew that he would definitely be rich. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen could feel the divine senses that were probing in his direction. He couldn't help but feel a little helpless. The arrow that he had shot was very secretive. It would not be easy for cultivators below the transcending heaven level to detect his location. However, it was impossible for the transcending heaven level experts, who were engaged in a decisive battle, not to mention that their divine senses were extremely powerful. If Zhuowen had done nothing in the space-time tunnel but secretly observed, no one would have detected his existence. However, after he had shot that arrow, he had immediately exposed his location. However, Zhuowen was not worried. The only ones who could pose a threat to him now were the transcending heaven level experts. As for cultivators below the transcending heaven level, they could not threaten his life at all. After shooting that arrow, Zhuowen did not shoot a second arrow. Instead, he secretly quieted down. Yaro Xiangjuan belonged to the Yin and Yang divine sect, while Jiang Qixing was a disciple of the sun-chasing temple. Among the human race, there were still their elders and fellow disciples. After Yaro Xiangjuan and Jiang Qisheng were rescued by the divine arrow, the two of them returned to their respective teams under the instructions of the experts of their respective forces. The human race and the alien race, who had stopped fighting because of the arrow, began fighting again. The battle was getting more and more intense, and the casualties on both sides were increasing. Bang! Suddenly, there was a loud roar. On the ground not far away, a figure suddenly broke out of the ground. The place where the figure broke out of the ground was a huge pit. Everyone looked over and found that this person was the merman leader who had been brutally beaten by Elder Zhong. At this moment, the merman leader was in a rather sorry state. Her scaly face was slightly pale, and the aura on her body was somewhat weak. She was panting heavily. Chapter 3045. Resolute Elder Zhong. Old man, the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill are very terrifying. Your aura has already begun to weaken. Since you didn't kill me in one breath just now, you have to die now. The merman leader stomped his right foot and turned into an afterimage as he rushed towards Elder Zhong. It had to be said that this merman leader was very sinister. He knew that he was no match for Elder Zhong, who had consumed the explosive enlightenment pill. When Elder Zhong hurriedly went to save Zhongli Haoyang, this fellow had been hiding in the huge pit, pretending to be dead, waiting for the effects of the explosive enlightenment pill on Elder Zhong's body to pass. Elder Zhong, be careful. Zhongli and Haoyang naturally noticed the leader of the merfolk race rushing over and hurriedly warned. Young miss, don't worry. This old man's life is very tough. You rest here first. Also, you must take good care of the possession talisman that the Lord gave you before he left. That thing can protect you during critical moment. After Elder Zhong finished speaking, he stomped his right foot on the air, causing the entire space to tremble violently as he disappeared on the spot. Bang! 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 Immediately, Elder Zhong blocked the incoming merman leader in mid-air. The two of them engaged in a fierce battle, causing terrifying shockwaves to sweep out. Poochie. The two of them fought for less than an hour before the merman leader seized the opportunity to punch Elder Zhong in the chest. Elder Zhong spat out a mouthful of blood as he continuously retreated in the air. Zhongli Haoyang cried out in worry. She could clearly see that Elder Zhong's entire body was trembling. His palms were sweating profusely, and the aura on his body had become very chaotic. Zhongli Haoyang knew that the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill were beginning to show. She knew very well how great the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill were. It was already very impressive that Elder Zhong could endure the side effects of the explosive enlightenment pill and persist in fighting the merman leader. The leader of the merfolk race had also suffered heavy injuries, but compared to Elder Zhong, it was not even worth mentioning. Die, you old bastard. The merman leader did not plan to give Elder Zhong a chance to catch his breath. He planned to end the battle quickly. He could tell that Elder Zhong was already an arrow at the end of its flight. This old man had been resisting the backlash from the side effects of the burst enlightenment divine pill, and now that he was severely injured by Yang Kai's punch, he might not be able to suppress the backlash that was about to come. There was no fear in Elder Zhong's eyes. He stared coldly at the leader of the mermaids and took a deep breath. His eyes were filled with determination. Waves of blood qi erupted from his body. His blood seemed to be burning at this moment, evaporating into a bloody mist that obscured his vision. Elder Zhong, no. You'll die if you do this. Zhongli Haoyang's beautiful eyes narrowed as she revealed a sorrowful expression. She knew that Elder Zhong was burning his blood essence. Old man, aren't you afraid of death? When the leader of the mermen saw that Elder Zhong was burning his blood essence, her eyes could not help but shrink. She looked at Elder Zhong as if he was crazy. He was very clear that after using the burst enlightenment divine pill and being heavily injured by him, this old fellow was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Now, he was actually burning his blood essence. He really didn't want to live anymore. It's enough to have you accompany me to the grave. Elder Zhong glanced at the leader of the mermen race indifferently. Then, he turned back to look at Zhongli Haoyang and sighed. Young miss, this old man has failed to live up to the expectations of the Hall Master. I'm afraid I can't accompany you out of the door of darkness. Zhongli Haoyang was already weeping at this moment. Logically speaking, it was very difficult for an expert of the Master of Heaven to die. With Elder Zhong's current state, if he insisted on leaving this place, the leader of the merman race would not be able to catch up. However, Elder Zhong knew that if he escaped, the battle between the Master of Heaven of the human race and the foreign race would tilt. At that time, the leader of the merman race would definitely join the team of the second elder of the Phoenix people. Right now, Senki Yin and the other two were only tied with the second elder of the Phoenix people. They were even at a disadvantage. If he escaped and the leader of the merman race joined in, the three of them would immediately be defeated. Senki Yin and the other two would definitely escape. And the human race team would probably be wiped out. Although Elder Zhong was not a saint, he was still a member of the human race. Naturally, he would not do something so treacherous. Fight. Elder Zhong's eyes were filled with battle intent. Blood intent erupted from the top of his head. He was like an unparalleled god of war as he charged toward the leader of the merman race. This lunatic. The leader of the merman race had an ugly expression, but he could only fight. I just have to hold this old man back. The leader of the merman race was very cautious. He did not want to fight Elder Zhong head-on. Instead, he planned to wear Elder Zhong down. After all, Elder Zhong's injuries were too severe. Even if he burned his blood essence, he would not be able to hold on for long. However, the following battle made the leader of the merman race even more upset. This was because Elder Zhong was like a lunatic. He had completely given up on defense. Instead, he attacked the leader of the merman race time and time again without hesitation. The leader of the merman race did not even have time to defend himself. He could only passively receive Elder Zhong's crazy attacks and immediately fell into a disadvantage. As time passed, the leader of the merman race's injuries increased. During this period, he had spat out countless mouthfuls of blood. His face was pale, and his aura was getting weaker. His expression was getting worse. There was even fear in his eyes. The old man before him was simply a lunatic. He was attacking without any regard for his life. He knew very well that Elder Zhong's injuries were more severe than his. However, he could not allow this to continue. Even if the old man died before him, he would be half dead by then. Elder Zhong, Zhongli Haoyang saw that Elder Zhong was covered in injuries. His clothes were blood red. They were dyed red by Elder Zhong's blood. Fart. The leader of the merman race spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Elder Zhong who was charging toward him again and could not help but shout in fear, "Old man, do you really want to die? Let me tell you, no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to kill me. You'll die in front of me. It doesn't matter. I'll cripple you so that you won't be able to fight. By then, someone will take care of you." Elder Zhong was neither sad nor happy. He continued to attack the leader of the merman race without changing his rhythm. On the space-time tunnel, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He glanced at Elder Zhong and knew that the old man would not be able to last for more than 10 breaths of time. He was acting so valiantly now. It was obvious that this was the final radiance of the setting sun. Elder Zhong would not be able to kill the leader of the merman race within 10 breaths of time. Zhuowen's eyes became sharp. He flicked his finger and took out a blood-stained horn. He placed it on the bowstring. Then, he pulled the blood-stained horn into a full moon. An unprecedented, terrifying killing intent filled the entire space-time tunnel. Now that Zhuowen's Pangu sacred body had advanced to the later stage of 6 stars, he could pull the bowstring of the Huyi divine bow into a full moon easily. Zhuowen's eyes were cold. He released the bowstring. Suddenly, the Huyi divine arrow shot out with a thunderous sound. Chapter 3046. Su Long's death. Huyi's godly arrow was extremely fast. It tore through the sky like a bolt of lightning. Wherever the divine arrow passed, space would collapse and the laws would be reversed. The killing intent on the surface of the divine arrow, in particular, seemed to be corporeal. It actually formed a blood-red vortex around the divine arrow. The blood-red whirlpools were densely packed around the arrow. They were like countless bloody mouths that could devour everything around them. 10 breaths' time was very short. Zhuoan only spent 5 breaths' time from the moment he drew the bow to the moment he released the Hu Yi's godly arrow to the moment it arrived in front of the merman leader. At that moment, the merman leader was being held back by Elder Zhong and was at a disadvantage. Damn it! Who is it? How dare you shoot an arrow from the dark? When the merman chief sensed the terrifying killing intent from the divine arrow, he felt the fear of death in his heart and could not help but cry out. If Elder Zhong was too exhausted to fight after 10 breaths' time, the merman leader might still be able to avoid the attack of the terrifying Hu Yi's godly arrow. However, he was being suppressed by Elder Zhong too severely. Moreover, the arrow that shot out from an unknown place in the void this time was many times more terrifying than the previous arrow, be it in terms of its power or the accumulated killing intent. Especially when the killing intent locked onto him, he felt goosebumps all over his body. He could feel that even if he was at his peak, he might be severely injured if he took the arrow head-on. If he was hit now, his chances of survival were too slim. Run. I have to run. That was the only thought in the merman leader's mind. Boom. A terrifying blood aura burst out from the merman leader's body. He had burned his blood essence as well. An aura that even surpassed Elder Zhong's came one after another. Old fart, get out of my way. The leader of the merman tribe roared and punched at Elder Zhong. Elder Zhong's expression changed drastically. He realized that the power of the merman leader's punch was far greater than any of his previous attacks. He did not expect the leader of the merfolk race to be able to erupt with such terrifying power after burning her blood essence. However, Elder Zhong was also determined. He knew that he did not have long to live. If he could not eliminate the leader of the merman race, his sacrifice would not be worth mentioning. You are not allowed to do anything. You have to keep the leader of the merfolk here. This was the only thought in Elder Zhong's mind. Elder Zhong desperately burned all the remaining blood essence in his body, and his aura reached an unprecedented height. However, Elder Zhong's body looked extremely tattered. The exposed skin on his face and limbs were even more withered. From afar, he looked like a bag of bones. In the space-time tunnel, Zhuoan silently looked at Elder Zhong's miserable state and sighed in his heart. He knew that Elder Zhong was already at the end of his rope. He could only unleash one more attack. After that, Elder Zhong's life would also dissipate. Su Long, this is this old man's final move. You better take it well. Old Zhong's low and deep voice seemed so ethereal. It was like an echo that reverberated in one's ears, sometimes far, sometimes near. Boom. After Elder Zhong finished speaking, he stomped his right foot and disappeared on the spot. He tore through space and charged towards the leader of the merfolk race, Su Long. At this moment, Elder Zhong had abandoned his physical body and life in exchange for the most terrifying destructive power of his final attack. Boom boom boom. The moment Elder Zhong and Su Long's fists collided, it was as if countless thunderbolts were raging in the surroundings. Deafening explosions continuously resounded in the surroundings. The moment the loud explosions rang out, an unprecedentedly terrifying wave of air spread out. It was like an ocean in a stormy weather, setting off layer after layer of terrifying waves that were endless and terrifying. Spurt. Elder Zhong and Su Long both spat out large mouthfuls of blood at the same time. Their fists had completely shattered when they collided, and the terrifying shockwaves that spread out even shattered their entire arms to their shoulders. This was only the damage to their bodies. The damage to their spirits was much more serious than the damage to their bodies. Bang! Elder Zhong was heavily smashed into the ground, kneeling on one knee. His left hand was placed on his knee, while his right hand was propped up on the ground. His head was lowered, and he did not move at all. As for Su Long, he fell to the ground in a sorry state, smashing a huge hole in the ground. He spat out another mouthful of blood as he lay on the ground, his entire body trembling. His face was pale, and he was actually gasping for air. No. Su Long's injuries were really too severe. He lay on his back in the huge hole, his entire body twitching. He actually did not have any extra strength to support his body and flee this place. After that, The Yishan arrow had already pierced through the air with peerless killing intent. It was terrifyingly fast, arriving before Su Long in an instant. At this moment, in the battlefield, everyone raised their eyelids and looked at the divine arrow that was approaching Su Long. In the alien race team, no one made a move. The others were not stupid. They all deeply felt the peerless killing intent in the Yishan arrow. It was really too terrifying. This kind of terrifying killing intent was not something they could withstand. If they were Empyrean masters, they might have been able to block the arrow for Su Long. Unfortunately, the only Empyrean masters in the foreign race team were Su Long and the two elders of the Phoenix race. The second elder of the Phoenix people naturally saw this scene. Although he had the absolute advantage in the joint forces of Senki Yin and the other two, he could not take down the three of them in a short period of time. Naturally, he could not free himself to block this arrow for Su Long Pucci. The sound of an arrow piercing into flesh resounded in this space. The divine arrow finally arrived in front of Su Long. Then, under Su Long's terrified gaze, it completely sank into his chest. An arrow of blood spurted out. Su Long's entire body trembled violently. His eyes were wide open in anger as he stared fixedly at the sky. The divine arrow had sunk into his chest, nailing him to the ground. An invisible ripple spread out in all directions with Su Long as the center. It was like a raging wave, extremely ferocious. Su Long roared towards the sky, his voice filled with unwillingness and resentment. Before he died, he didn't even know who the murderer was. His death was truly too unjust. Unfortunately, after Su Long roared towards the sky, he lay on the ground with his eyes wide open. However, his life aura gradually dimmed until it was extinguished. The moment Su Long was killed, Zhuowen discovered that the starry sky token on his waist was violently vibrating. Chapter 3047. Terrifying points 1053,000 points. Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles as he stared at the points on the starry sky token in disbelief. He clearly remembered that his points on the starry sky token had only been slightly more than 50,000. In the blink of an eye, the points on the starry sky token had increased by 1 million. This was too exaggerated. Zhuowen quickly realized something. Could it be because he had just killed the merman leader, Su Long? Speaking of which, the starry sky token had recognized Zhuowen's cultivation base by default. Although his clone had cultivated the Pangu sacred body and had terrifying strength, it was only a body tempering technique after all. The aura recorded on the starry sky token seemed to be the specific cultivation base aura of the human race. As for the aura of the clone's Pangu sacred body, the starry sky token seemed to be unable to sense it at all. Therefore, Zhuowen's killing of Su Long was equivalent to him crossing a huge gap with his eternal overlord cultivation base and killing a Skyreach master expert who stood at the peak of the starry sky. Such an example had probably never happened before in the records of the starry sky contribution ranking, or even among the cultivators of the entire starry sky. After reaching the Skyreach master realm, one's means had reached an unfathomable level. All kinds of divine powers and abilities were close to reaching the heavens. It was difficult for a Skyreach master expert to kill a Skyreach master expert of the same level, let alone an ant like an eternal overlord. Of course, Zhuowen also knew that this was entirely due to his good luck. If Elder Zhong hadn't paid the price with his life to beat Su Long to the brink of death, he probably wouldn't have been able to kill Su Long even if he had used the Huyi divine bow and the Huyi divine arrow to shoot the strongest arrow of his life. Everyone present was stunned. The scene was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's gaze fell on Su Long, who had been firmly nailed to the ground by the divine arrow. There was joy, bewilderment, amazement, and of course, disbelief in their eyes. The powerful and terrifying leader of the Merfolk clan, Su Long, had actually died. Moreover, he had died to a divine arrow that had shot out of nowhere. Thinking of the archer who had yet to show himself, everyone was shocked. They looked around vigilantly, afraid that another arrow would shoot out of nowhere and take away their lives. On the other hand, the humans were much calmer. This archer had shot out 2 divine arrows, both of which had killed non-humans. Clearly, the owner of this divine arrow was on the side of the human race. Who is it? The Phoenix People's Saintess narrowed her eyes in disbelief as she stared at the white cage nailed to the ground by the divine arrow. At the same time, her consciousness had locked onto a certain direction in front of her. She seemed to see a figure in the depths of the void in that direction. However, the figure soon disappeared. When she wanted to use her divine consciousness to investigate again, she discovered that she could no longer find it. The Phoenix People's Saintess stared in that direction. She knew that the cultivator who had shot the arrow was hiding somewhere in the depths of the void in that direction. It wasn't just the Phoenix People's Saintess. The third-step Tao validation powerhouses in the human and non-human teams had also discovered the general direction of Zhuowen's hiding place. As for Zhuowen's specific location, perhaps only a few half-step Ascension Masters and true Ascension Masters would be able to see it. In the spacetime tunnel, Zhuowen stomped his right foot and rich spacetime power spread from the soles of his feet. Then, he quietly left the spacetime tunnel and entered another one. At the same time, he evolved the heavenly divination technique to the extreme. The fate aura on his body was completely concealed. However, Zhuowen didn't leave immediately. Instead, he hid in another spacetime tunnel near the Door of Darkness. He was very confident in his heavenly divination technique. However, concealing the fate aura on his body was something that even the Ascension Masters might not necessarily be able to do. Fate was an attribute that only living beings possessed. Inanimate objects didn't possess. Zhuowen used the heavenly divination technique to conceal his fate. In a sense, he was equivalent to an inanimate object. No matter how powerful the Ascension Master's consciousness was, it was unlikely that they would be able to detect an inanimate object in a spacetime tunnel deep in the void. Of course, Zhuowen's 2 arrows had already revealed that he was hiding in the spacetime tunnel near the Door of Darkness. As long as the Ascension Masters in this team searched carefully and locked onto this area, they would still be able to find Zhuowen. Zhuowen flicked his fingers. He took the arrow, narked it, drew it, and released it. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest hesitation. Whoosh! The divine arrow, filled with killing intent, rushed into the ranks of the non-human teams. Although Zhuowen hadn't shot a Huyi divine arrow this time, it was only a Genesis divine arrow. However, after being strengthened by the Huyi divine bow, the arrow seemed to have been given a life of its own, turning it into a killing god. Puff! 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 The divine arrow pierced through the ranks of the non-human teams. Every time it pierced through the ranks of the non-human teams, blood would be spilled. Originally, the non-human races had the upper hand in the battle against the human race. However, with the interference of Zhuowen's divine arrow, the non-human teams were thrown into chaos. Zhuowen shot out arrow after arrow. Every arrow was like a meteor crashing into the earth, causing a huge commotion among the non-human teams. After Zhuowen shot out the 10th arrow, the non-humankind army suffered heavy casualties. 30% of them were killed by the divine arrows, while 10% died under the joint attack of the human army. Most of the remaining non-human teams were injured, and their morale was greatly reduced. The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people slapped out her palm. Scorching flames surged out and slapped away a divine arrow that was flying through the air. Her beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent. Bastard! Coward! Do you only know how to shoot arrows from the shadows? The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people shouted angrily into the air. She was going crazy from anger. The non-human teams clearly had the upper hand. If they had been given a little more time, they would have been able to completely crush the human race and wipe out all the humans who had entered the Door of Darkness. However, she never expected that someone would appear out of nowhere. That person, who was hiding in the depths of the void and whom she had never seen before, was shooting arrows one after another. Furthermore, that person who hadn't shown himself yet was shooting arrows that were extremely powerful. Little did she know that Lord Tongqian's early-stage divine arrow had pierced through his chest and nailed him to the ground. Both his body and soul had been destroyed. However, that person didn't give up. He continued to shoot arrows, each of which was extremely powerful. In the end, the human race's disadvantage was turned around. Even now, the non-human race's situation was starting to take a turn for the worse. They were being suppressed by the human race to the point of suffocation. I'm coming out. Do you dare to fight me one-on-one? The Holy Maiden of the Phoenix people originally thought that the person shooting arrows would definitely ignore her and continue to shoot arrows. Chapter 30-48. The Reckless Mdar. A cowering and hiding fellow. Other than shooting arrows, what true abilities do you have? The Saintess doesn't even need to make a move. I, Mdar, can easily get rid of you. Elder Mdar of the merfolk race was not far from the Phoenix people's Saintess. Upon seeing Zhuowen's provocation, this old fellow immediately spoke up, acting like the Saintess' most loyal dog. He stood beside the Saintess with his head held high and his chest puffed out as he spoke disdainfully. In the spacetime tunnel, Zhuowen's lips curled up slightly when he saw Mdar of the merfolk race provoking him. Before entering the Door of Darkness, Mdar had caused him a lot of trouble because of Sauron. If it weren't for Xiaojin's support, Mdar would have definitely killed him. The current Zhuowen was no longer the same as before. Before his Pangu sacred body had broken through, he might not have been Mdar's match. However, after entering the Door of Darkness and obtaining Gongong's GU, as well as the inheritance of Gongong's energy, his Pangu sacred body had smoothly advanced to 6-star and even directly jumped to late-stage 6-star. His strength had more than doubled. Mdar was just an ordinary early-stage lord of creation. Although he was stronger than Moses, there was a limit to his strength. In Zhuowen's eyes, Mdar was just an ant that was slightly stronger than Moses. Are you sure? Zhuowen's voice came from the void, making it impossible to tell where it came from. Mdar raised his head and puffed out his chest as he said proudly, just a guy who hides his head and shows his tail. In my opinion, you're already amazing if you can last 3 moves against me. Zhuowen looked at the puffed-up Mdar as if he was looking at an idiot. He really couldn't understand where this guy's confidence came from. He actually looked down on him like this. However, I have a condition. You're not allowed to use that divine arrow you just shot out. You need to fight me openly. Otherwise, I really won't bother to fight you. After saying this, Mdar's eyes were very vigilant, and his eyelids were twitching. He guessed that the mysterious human hiding in the depths of the void definitely didn't have a high cultivation, but he had a powerful arrow-type divine weapon. As long as that human doesn't use that strange divine arrow, he won't be a threat to me at all. Ha! So that's what this old fellow is planning. Zhuowen scoffed in his heart and opened his mouth once more. Old fellow, your tone isn't small. I promise you that I won't use that divine arrow. As he spoke, Zhuowen's right foot gently stepped out in the air. Immediately after, intense ripples spread out from under his feet, and his figure gradually disappeared into the void. And Mdar. Mdar's Mdar. Mdar Mdar Mdar. Was Mdar Mdar Mdar. Mdar was Mdar Mdar Mdar. Mdar Mdar Studio Mdar Mdar Studio. Mdar Mdar Studio of. Mdar of NDA. Mdar grunted and hurriedly retreated until he was around the merman leader, Su Cage. Suddenly, an aura that made people tremble appeared above Mdar's head. Shortly after, the space above him shattered. Mdar raised his head. His eyes were filled with fear. He saw a huge palm in the shattered space above him. The palm was sparkling and translucent. It emitted a glass-like radiance. It didn't look like a real palm. Instead, it looked like an exquisitely carved jade bracelet. Mdar regretted it. If he knew that the person who shot the arrow was so terrifying, he wouldn't have stood up for the Saintess of the Phoenix people and provoked such a ruthless person. The Saintess of the Phoenix clan was shocked. She looked at the crystal palm that was pressing down in disbelief. Her pretty face was deathly pale, without the slightest trace of blood, because she felt a familiar and terrifying aura from the palm. It can't be. That guy should be dead. But this aura and attack method are too similar. The Saintess of the Phoenix people muttered to herself. Her face was unsightly. She must have recalled some bad memories. As for all the cultivators who doubted the person who shot the arrow, they were all shocked. Only now did they realize that they had indeed underestimated this person. Not only did this fellow know how to shoot arrows from the back, but he could also face them head-on. He was an all-rounder. Mdar cried out in alarm. He unleashed all of his abilities, exploding forth with all of his methods, stimulating 100%, no, it should be 200% of his potential. All the foreign races looked at Mdar, their eyes filled with hope. They all cheered loudly for Mdar, hoping that Mdar would be able to defeat this mountain-like palm. After Mdar screamed, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, he ran away like a wisp of smoke. It was very straightforward, as if he had been planning this for a long time. In the spacetime tunnel, Zhuowen sneered repeatedly. Looking at Mdar, who had turned around to flee, he said indifferently, "Can you escape?" Rumble. Just as the incomparably huge palm was about to hit the ground, it suddenly changed direction and chased after the fleeing Mdar. Although Mdar had unleashed all of his abilities, the gap between him and Zhuowen was too great. Before he could escape far, he was caught up by the sparkling and translucent palm. After Mdar screamed, he could no longer make any sound, because he had already been smashed into powder by the palm. His divine soul and physical body had collapsed. All traces of him in this world had been annihilated by that unparalleled palm at this moment. Deng deng deng. After Mdar was smashed into powder by the palm, the whole place became much quieter. But soon, it was broken by light footsteps. Everyone's gazes gathered in the direction of the footsteps. That was where Su Long's corpse was. At this moment, Su Long's eyes were still wide open. He looked at the sky as if lamenting the unfairness of the heavens. Beside Su Long's corpse, a young man was strolling leisurely. It was as if he was leisurely strolling in his own courtyard. This young man had extremely fair cheeks, red lips, and white teeth. If this young man were to wear women's clothes, no one would be able to recognize him as a man. However, the Phoenix People's Saintess and many cultivators with high cultivation could tell at a glance that this person was in disguise. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan's eyes flashed. They knew that this young man in disguise was most likely Long Wen, who they thought was dead. Although they couldn't recognize Zhuowen's real face under his disguise, this person's divine arrow had exposed his identity. The Phoenix People's Saintess' eyelids twitched. She stared at the handsome young man, her beautiful eyes full of fear. Zhuowen slowly walked in front of Su Long's corpse. With a curl of his right index finger, under everyone's gazes, the Huyi divine arrow that was embedded in Su Long's chest was pulled out and automatically entered Zhuowen's palm. After Zhuowen put away the Huyi divine arrow, he ignored the Phoenix People's Saintess who was cautiously not far away. Instead, he slowly walked to Elder Zhong, who was kneeling on one knee with his head lowered. At this moment, Zhongli Haoyang was kneeling in front of Elder Zhong. Her face was covered in tears and the sorrow in her beautiful eyes couldn't be concealed for a long time. "Miss Zhongli, I'm sorry. I didn't have time to save him." Chapter 3049. Appear. Zhongli Haoyang looked up blankly. She glanced at Zhuowen, and the confusion in her eyes cleared up a little. Zhuowen knew that Zhongli Haoyang had already guessed his identity. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to look at him so clearly. "Brother Long, you don't have to apologize. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to avenge Elder Zhong. I should be the one thanking you. However, you have to be careful of the Phoenix People's Saintess. She should have recognized you." Zhongli Haoyang's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen knew that she was the one who had sent him a voice transmission. Zhuowen nodded and looked at the Phoenix People's Saintess, who was standing not too far away. The corners of his mouth curled up into a cold smile. The moment he had made his move, he knew that the Phoenix People's Saintess would have sensed it. However, he didn't care. The Phoenix People's Saintess was indeed very strong, especially after she had awakened her bloodline. She was much stronger than Mdar, but there was still a big gap between her and Zhuowen. Right now, Zhuowen was planning to capture the Phoenix People's Saintess and find out about Mu Chenshua's whereabouts. Although the Phoenix People's Saintess looked almost the same as Mu Chenshua, Zhuowen knew that the former wasn't Mu Chenshua at all. She was a completely different person. At that moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Zhuowen. Their expressions were surprisingly similar. They were shocked, puzzled, and in disbelief. This was because the aura of this handsome young man who had appeared out of nowhere was actually only at the Eternal Overlord realm. The Eternal Overlord realm was the last realm of the second step of the Tao validation stage. This person was quite young, so his talent was pretty good if he could cultivate to the Eternal Overlord realm. However, this person had actually killed the early stage Creation Lord Mdar with a flip of his hand. This was too unbelievable. The Creation Lord realm was the second realm of the third step of the Tao validation stage, which was 2 major realms higher than the Eternal Overlord realm. Logically speaking, a Creation Lord realm cultivator could crush an Eternal Overlord realm as easily as crushing an ant. However, the situation seemed to be reversed now. The Eternal Lord Youth who had suddenly appeared had become the person who could crush an ant, while the initial stage Creation Lord Morda had become an ant. This kind of nondescript result had a huge impact on everyone. It even subverted their worldview. Who is this person? The aura is really familiar. Sen Qi and Yin, who were entangled with the 2 elders of the Phoenix clan, naturally noticed Zhuowen. The 3 of them exchanged glances with each other, their eyes filled with confusion. They felt that the young man's aura was very familiar, but they couldn't remember who he was. On the other hand, Jiao Yanghong, the Grand Elder of the Yin Corps sect, was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. He looked at Zhuowen's back with fear. Although he had recognized Zhuowen's identity before, he did not expect that this person's strength had actually become so terrifying. Morda, who was at the initial stage Creation Lord realm, had actually been easily destroyed by this fellow. Although Jiao Yanghong's cultivation was much higher than Morda's and he had already reached the level of a half-step skybound master, he felt that given his current strength, he could at most fight to a draw with Zhuowen. Perhaps he could even gain the upper hand. However, Jiao Yanghong knew that he could not completely crush this person at the moment unless he became a skybound master. As he thought about this, Jiao Yanghong glanced at Senki Yin, who was arguing with the Phoenix people in the distance. He wondered if he should inform Senki Yin of Zhuowen's identity. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan wanted to walk toward Zhuowen but were quickly stopped by Zhuowen's voice transmission. Brother Jiang, junior sister Yao, try not to acknowledge me now. I have a lot of enemies now. If you acknowledge me, I'm afraid you will be implicated. Just pretend that you don't know me. Zhuowen's voice lingered in their minds, stopping them from taking a step forward. Jiang Qixing and Yao Xiangjuan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They silently glanced at Zhuowen's back and no longer moved forward. What Zhuowen said was right. The 2 of them were too weak. If they went over to acknowledge Zhuowen now, it was inevitable that they would be targeted. Although they had their own factions supporting them, Zhuowen had offended a lot of people. Yi Hanfei of the Yin and Yang Divine sect had been killed by Zhuowen. After that, he had killed many powerful foreign race geniuses and offended the Phoenix people. Could it be that if they acknowledged Zhuowen, the powers behind them would help Zhuowen? This was obviously impossible. The 2 of them felt helpless. They transmitted their voices to Zhuowen, telling him to be careful, and retreated to their respective groups. At the same time, the 2 of them were also curious about how Long Wen had been resurrected and how he had left the door of darkness earlier than them. They didn't know what method Long Wen had used. Zhuowen ignored the surrounding gazes and looked at the Phoenix people's Saintess. He said indifferently, "Saintess, do you dare to fight me one-on-one?" As soon as these words came out, many people's gazes fell on the Phoenix people's Saintess. Then, they turned back to Zhuowen with strange gazes. Everyone knew that the Phoenix people's Saintess was a famous monstrous genius in the primitive heaven realm. She had the 99 Phoenix body and possessed monstrous strength. Many experts of the older generation weren't necessarily a match for the Phoenix people's Saintess. Although the Phoenix people's Saintess cultivation was lower than Mu Da's, they knew that the Phoenix people's Saintess was much stronger than Mu Da. Killing Mu Da wouldn't take too much effort. In everyone's eyes, the strength of the Phoenix people's Saintess should be second only to the 2 Skyreach masters in the foreign race group. Although the sudden appearance of this human youth had shocked everyone, it wasn't enough. Therefore, When this person proposed to fight the Phoenix People's Saintess, everyone sneered. They felt that this person was masochistic. He actually dared to challenge the Phoenix People's Saintess. This is ridiculous. How dare you threaten to fight the Saintess one-on-one? You're not qualified. That's right. Who do you think you are? You're just a despicable human. How dare you challenge the Saintess? The Saintess won't accept the challenge of a despicable human like you. Even if she did, she could kill you with a slap. However, that would dirty her hands. Everyone in the foreign race group looked at Zhuowen unkindly. Some of them even belittled Zhuowen. Zhuowen completely ignored these taunts. Instead, he looked indifferently at the Phoenix People's Saintess. Killing intent flashed in his eyes as he continued, "The dignified Saintess doesn't even have the courage to accept my challenge." The beautiful eyes of the Phoenix People's Saintess flickered as she looked at Zhuowen. Her eyes were full of fear. After she guessed that this person was Long Wen, she had already wanted to retreat. One had to know that she had fought Zhuowen on the Sorcerer God's altar in the Door of Darkness. She knew how terrifying and powerful the latter was. If this guy hadn't been distracted during that battle, she would have been in danger. She might even have died. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.